Sword of Coming Chapter 1179. Chapter 1179. The scholar is here. Qin Pingon asked curiously, "Are you really going to hold 2 night tours in a row? It's almost enough to hold one. Even Shimei River Water God Gao Brewery is not short of money. The last time I drank at the village school, I had to tell the truth after drinking. Today there is a night banquet and then take a day off. Tone, when everyone finally saves some money, there will be another game the day after tomorrow. No one's money will fall from the sky. I really can't stand it." Weibo glanced at him. Qin Pingon said with interest, "When I didn't ask." Weibo said, "I made an appointment with Meng Rong to go to the Changpu River for a drink." Qin Pingon nodded, "I have to celebrate." Weibo looked at him again. Qin Pingon said helplessly, "Just tell me what you want me to do. Do you need me to go over there as a host, bring a few jars of good wine over there, or the assistant to help you play a few laps, block the wine for you, or you guys drinking flower wine? You can make it hard, just need me to show up at the end to help you secretly settle the bill?" Weibo said, "Just do it if you have the heart. Meng Rong really wants to make an appointment with you for a drink. I would like to thank you for a few words." I helped to push it away. Qin Pingon hurriedly thanked him. Weibo went straight away. Qin Pingon sighed. "Damn, with the same virtue as Lin Yupu, this is not about to become a god, and he has a good temper. Why don't you go arrogant with Mr. Da?" They were going to the Ministry of War office located in Kujiao Lane, Qianbu Lang. Jiang Shangzhen originally wanted to support the old Shangshu, but he never thought that the old man would leave the palace city, and there would be no long Champhubu. Qin Pingon planned to give 500 military books to the Songshu lecture hall directly under the Ministry of War, which were ready-made copies anyway. Because they have been to the capital before, Qin Pingon and Xiaomo have used their blindfolds. Jiang Shangzhen and Xiego, the chief 1 and 2 people at Luopao Mountain, are very casual. When they arrived at the heavily guarded Ministry of War office, the old Shangshu led them through the corridor. On the way they encountered many officials of the Ministry of War, but none of them took the initiative to say hello to the old Shangshu. Jiang Shangzhen sighed. Lao Shangshu is not the usual prestige in his own yamen. Just like myself, no one dared to greet me every time I went to Xinzhuan Peak to attend the discussion in the Zhuxian. Xinchen smiled and said, "There is no official or not official authority, it's just that you don't like to bow your head and bow your waist. Not only our military department, but all the affairs of the government department in the capital, we strive for a quick solution. Well, except for Zhao Duanjin's Ministry of Rights, red tape and strict rules, I occasionally stop by there, and every few steps I have to nod to someone I don't know. My neck is sore and I have to put on a dog skin plaster when I come back." Jiang Shangzhen automatically ignored the old man's yin and yang anger towards the yamen of the Ministry of Rights, and said with a smile, "What's the point of being an official? The Ministry of Rights and the Hanlin Academy do pay attention to a lot. For example, when the sun shines on the 5th brick of the corridor, officials will get the yamen point. Like Chao Gingxin, a servant of the Ministry of Personnel, he is a very special case in the Dali officialdom. This son of the Chao family of Shangzhou Kingdom, who was promoted from the Longquan Kiln superintendent, was often late for ordering, and his salary was not enough to be deducted." Xinchen said, "It's still very beautiful outside the yamen. I just said that I went to Changpu River for a drink. Every time I check out I get a huge discount. I don't dare to go there often for fear of breaking down the restaurant. The room is very spacious, which is equivalent to opening up 3 rooms. In addition to reviewing official documents, the old minister can also hold small-scale discussions here. There is a row of bookshelves against the wall, and the other 2 sides of the cabinets on the top are all books and files. The eyes are full of books, and it is not too much to describe the vastness of a sentence. It was rare for the old Shangshu to entertain guests here, and none of them wore official robes. Soon there was an exclusive secretary who worked in the Xianxia's office and brought tea. Sitting heavily on a heavily battered old Taisher chair, habitually leaning on crutches in both hands, resting his chin on the back of his hands, he smiled and said, "Qinguosher, it's better to be early. You'll let the Ministry of Works be gentle and the Ministry of Household Mu Yendu. Come over here, let them get to know Qinguosher and talk about business by the way." Although Xinchen is an important official of the same dynasty, but Xinchen is old and has been in various ministries, many of them are the mother's family yamen of the old Shangshu, plus Xinchen has many titles so that the 2 Shangshu came to the Ministry of War yamen. It doesn't matter, not to mention that Xinchen is still a teacher of Wen Air who cares about the encounter over Qi Xiang. When Air calls Mr. Xinchen, And whether or not he agrees depends on whether Xianxia is in a good mood. Oh no, it was his ears at that time. Not agile, Dali officialdom. Everyone knows that Xinlao Shangxi's ears have been eloquent and ineffective since he was young. Qin Pingon smiled and said, there is no need for this. Jiang Shangzhen used to watch the door in the imperial study, and was extremely bored, so he studied the details of the wearing of the various landscape deities in the house. The two ministers both wore court clothes and there were not many differences. For example, the boots on their feet were different. The heavy court boots were brand new but stained with dirt. Zhao Duanjin's boots are old but clean. Jiang Shangzhen was curious about how there was mud in the heavy boots. There is a time-honored shop specializing in the sale of chow boots in the capital of Dali. The people here in the capital, especially those who have lived near Ichi Alley and Cheer Street for generations, have developed a pair of sharp eyes. Xiaomo sat upright. Xiego leaned back on the chair lazily, pulled down his sable hat, covered his face and didn't know whether to sleep or rest. Xianxia asked, is Qin Guosher familiar with Beiju Luzhou Sanlang Temple? Qin Pingon paused for a moment, thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, I have indeed been to Beiju Luzhou a few times, but north of Jidu I have hardly set foot in it, so I am not familiar with Sanlang Temple. Jiang Shangzhen glanced at the mountain master. Qin Pingon smiled and said, but I have a sword fairy friend and he has a good relationship with Sanlang Temple. The old man nodded and said, the Ministry of Punishment intends to get some benefits for Dallas worship at all levels. Of course it is not a bribe. The Ministry of Household has approved it, but rejected several proposals of the Ministry of Punishment, and they are suspected of being inappropriate. I didn't know that firewood and rice were expensive and I spent money indiscriminately. Finally, I found a compromise method. According to the meaning of the Ministry of Household, one is the Immortal brew of Chongqun Palace. It was tougher than the money of the gods and I was going to buy a batch of cheap and high-quality Sanlang Temple futons. As a result, the Ministry of War also heard about this and had an idea. Anyway, they spent money to buy them. There was a discount, so I thought of buying a futon for all the cultivators in the army, but this would increase the cost of the household department, and Mu Yan just didn't move a stool to the penal department to sit and scold in the street. Qin Pingon nodded. The futon in the Sanlang Temple is indeed a good thing. It is said that one small summer money can be used for two. When he first visited Beiju Luzhou that year, Qin Pingon was deeply impressed by this kind of futon on the mountain. On the Beach of Bones, because of the yin emanating from a ghost valley, there was a small market commonly known as Nehiguan there. It was noon when the sun was shining and it was still cool. On the border between the two worlds, big and small, Pima Zong built a long series of thatched dojos on top of those yin-rich and quintessential springs. Help Qi practitioners breathe, and absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth faster. Sanlang Temple is the largest weapon shop on Beiju Luzhou, and the genealogical monks of Sanlang Temple are generally famous for being proficient in casting weapons. That is, they do not like to fight but they are very good at fighting. There is a well-known mantra in Sanlang Temple, don't bully honest people. The body-protecting spirit armor cast by Sanlang Temple, the sword Immortal's flying sword imitated by Hinjian Mountain, the three-color cassock of Fuguang Temple, and the crane cloak feather coat of Yunshao Palace of Zhou Xian Department of Dian Dynasty can all be regarded as famous all over the world. Haoran Jiuzhou in refining and forging weapons. Apart from the divine continent of the Middle Earth, there is only Liuxia continent which is rich in products which can be compared with Luzhou and Beiju. Just like Han Huizi, the old sect master of Taihui sword sect, there is a famous swordsmanship, which is called De Gong Jade Cutting. It is really impossible. There are many swordsmen in this continent, and ordinary Qi practitioners should not wear more robes and treasure armor when going out. Being able to carry a few more swords means more lives. At the same time, pure warriors also want to have a few weapons that can be used in hand, so that they can easily practice their hands with Qi practitioners and practice martial arts and boxing. If you buy a robe and a treasure armor, I will choose a few magic weapons for attacking and attacking. If you buy magic weapons for attacking and attacking, I will start with more defensive treasures and various amulets, and at the same time I will also secretly make some weapons that are not low in killing power. In the end, it led to the ups and downs of the mountains in Beiju Luzhou. The atmosphere was particularly simple, and the character was particularly straightforward. There was no hospitality, and it was embarrassing to say hello to people when going out. Qin Pingon once gave Lu Jinglong 100 pieces of Guyu money to help buy as many imitation swords of Henjian Mountain and Sanlang Temple treasure armor as possible. If there is any surplus, help Pom Pom and buy some idle treasures. In short, don't save me money. The implication is that we, Qin Shanju, want both quality and quantity. After all, Lu Jiangxian's face is very valuable. In the end, Lu Jinglong really went to the Sanlang Temple in person and helped to buy an imitation sword of Henjian Mountain and 2 pairs of treasure armor. There are signatures of 2 famous refiners. Generally speaking, the names on Ling Beijia are all the handwritings enshrined by the Patriarch Hall of Sanlang Temple. Later, Qin Pingon gave to Lu Beixiang's 2 direct disciples, sister and brother Yuanbao Yuanlai, who happened to have a pair of treasure armor. How can a pure martial artist not be able to wear a treasure armor? The rivers and lakes are sinister, the heart of guarding against others is indispensable, and there must be something to protect oneself. Later, I heard Bai Shou say that the surnamed Lu met another confidant at the Sanlang Temple, so the price is so easy to talk about. In terms of seniority, the female cultivator who nominally manages half of the weapons shops in Sanlang Temple is Yuan Xian's aunt. She, Lu Sui, the fairy of Xingxingshan, and Sun Qing, the head of Kaik Mansion, are all on the list of Beiju Luzhou. The beauties of the top 10 fairies. When Lu Jinglong was still the master of Lianran Peak, they belonged to Lu Jinglong. Anyway, in Beiju Luzhou everyone knows it. Thanks to the night tour feasts, the treasures in the treasure banknote office of Piyun Mountain and the storeroom of the Guard of Honor Division are piled up into mountains, and there are a large pile of catalogs that record them. Moreover, Qin Pingon heard Xiaoman said that the 2 yamen of Wei Shanzhen's family occupy a large area and have been expanded more than once. Among the countless gifts, there was a futon made in secret from the Sanlang Temple. Later, Xiaomo and Shanzhenfu spent money to buy a futon and brought it back to Luopao Mountain. The conclusion is that it is not difficult to imitate, but the cost cannot be reduced. First, it is limited by several key materials, and there is no substitute for Aquarius Island. Besides, whether it can be mass-produced, the cost gap is very large. Since even Xiao Mo said that, it means that the futon of Sanlang Temple is almost an extreme. In addition, Beiju Luzhou has 4 hilltops, all of which have business connections at the bottom of the box. For example, the robes of Laojun Lane were once sold to 6 continents other than Aquarius and Tonggishao. At that time, Beipingzu was too poor and Tonggishao was too closed. However, the robes of Laojun Lane have been monopolized by Kaiyonglinzong for a long time. It is rumored that the founder of Laojun Lane, Song Yun, whose Taoist name is similar, is extremely talented in refining things, but he is not good at business. When I was young, I had a high vision. Regardless of the cost, I only wanted to create the best robes on the mountain. As a result, I was hungry and cold. Later, Qiong Linzong came to the door and talked with her about cooperation. Planting the robes of Qinghe let Qiong Linzong earn a lot of money. And she has finally refined the famous robe that can be remembered in history called Ingran robe, which is extremely expensive, and is the first choice for qi practitioners in the upper 5 realms other than Beiju Luzhou sword cultivator. But it's a pity Laojun Lane can only make 1 piece every jiazi. Somewhat similar to the Yuhua Dan of Tonggishao Qinghu Palace, it is not sold for immortal money but a great favor. As for the cooperation between Song Yun and Qiong Linzong, whether she met a noble person in her life or an unkind person, on the Beiju Luzhou side, each has a different side. Later, Laojun Lane launched several treasure pots one after another, such as the armor parade tailor-made for the emperors, monarchs and nobles of one continent. The seal is cumbersome and the treasures are gorgeous and extremely precious. The Jade Pure Realm and the Earth Immortal cultivators as well as the lower 5 realm Qi cultivators were all beaten by Laojun Lane in one go, plus the royal families of various countries, lining up to take advantage of them. Grab these 3 kinds of customers at the same time, Liao Zhengxiang and Kaiyonglinzong. Of course the money is coming. The old man suddenly patted the handle of the chair. I almost forgot the old sect master Jiang, who is actually the one who is most familiar with Beiju Luzhou. Xiago pulled up his sable hat and glanced at Chief Shou. She got Bai Ze's permission and ran here to look for Xiao Imo. Xiago showed up at Beiju Luzhou at the beginning. So about Chief Shou's presence there, the word-of-mouth deeds on the side are relatively clear. It's been so many years and every time Jiang Shangzhen is mentioned the Qi practitioners over there are still gnashing their teeth and everyone will kill them. Jiang Shangzhen was still thick-skinned and said with a smile, "When you buy something from Beiju Luzhou you can just report my name, but there is a half or 15% discount, so I can't make any guarantees. It is estimated that as soon as they heard that Jiang Shangzhen was involved in the business, 9 out of 10 sects, they would say to the Dali court that as long as the third leg of Jiang thief was broken, they would not receive any money and give it away for nothing. Just like the Sanlang temple, Jiang Shangzhen is really familiar with him. As long as he is familiar there, he will treat Jiang Shangzhen, who almost became his son-in-law, well. Using a pseudonym or something was originally nothing. The problem was that Jiang Shangzhen hooked up with 2 female cultivators of the Yuan family at the same time. As for the Laojun alley, Jiang Shangzhen will of course not fall. He has been there a few times, and there is no reason for Jiang Shangzhen to make more trips just because there is a female nun Song Yun there. However, there is no story between the two sides. Song Yun has a cold personality and a secluded personality. She is a woman who is obsessed with refining things. Looking at Jiang Shangzhen is no different from looking at a dead person. But Jiang Shangzhen looked at her and felt amazing. Some women can kill people just relying on their backs. Jiang Shangzhen has only seen 3 women with such a style in his life. Besides Song Yun, there is another one who is now on Luopao Mountain. But Jiang Shang really didn't dare to have any crooked thoughts. It's one thing that the rabbit doesn't eat the grass on the edge of the nest, not to mention that the other party is the law of his own Luopa Mountain. The old man asked abruptly, "It is said that Hate Sword Mountain possesses 6 treasures of the town gate, which are the 6 imitation swords of the sword Immortal, who are known as the first-class authentic works. Among them only 4 are known by the outside world. They are Sitting Dead, Poem Ghost, Shrine, Sumi Mountain." Does Sect Master Jiang know what the other 2 imitation swords are called? Jiang Shangzhen is really clear, and he is very familiar with the secrets of Izhou's anecdote, and said, "It's Tong Yu and Hero's tomb." Jiang Shangzhen asked curiously, "What is the old Shangshu asking about this? You have friends on the mountain and you are in a hurry? But these imitation swords, generally speaking, money alone can't buy them." Hate Jianshan's business has always had little interaction with the court at the foot of Beiju Luzhou Mountain, mainly because the threshold is too high. In Jiang Shangzhen's words, it is only killing fat pigs and pitting rich people. For example, Jiang Shangzhen himself. Back then it was almost just a little bit that I bought the treasure of Zhinshan, which is also called Gentle Township, with a girl who met and fell in love with each other. Later it was Jiang Shangzhen's rare conscience discovery that he changed his mind temporarily. Otherwise he would have put the imitation sword of Hero's tomb in his pocket. This imitation sword can warm and nourish tens of thousands of ghost generals and Yin soldiers. Out of this thing the most suitable for group fights. Xin Chen smiled and said, "Many years ago Cui Guosher wanted to build a government-run kendo sect in our Dali territory. I happened to be one of the officials who handled this matter, but unfortunately it didn't happen. In fact, according to Cui Yes' earliest idea, Wan Qiong is indeed the best sect master of the kendo sect. First, Wan Qiong is the first swordsmith in Aquarius Island, and the Longji Mountain in the mountains to the west. Then a large piece of dragon-slaying cliff can be used as the foundation of the kendo sect. As for the sword cultivator embryos needed to open branches and loose leaves, those Dali sticks that are scattered all year round in the mountains and rivers of one continent are worshipped. They are not dry rice. In addition, the earthly branch monks of Dali, Yuan Huajing and Song Su were all born in swordsmanship, so the prototype and framework of the entire sect were built early. Henjian Mountain in Beiju Luzhou will be the ally of this sword sect. Listening to the tone, the national teacher Cui Yu is going to personally facilitate this. Fenglei Garden will not move, but Xingyang Mountain will definitely become the downhill of this brand new sect. In addition, in the territory of the old Zhuing dynasty, there will be a genealogy cultivator who is the second descendant of Jianxiu. One sect and 2 descended the mountain, forming a chasing situation, secretly created 3 sword formations, and finally used the imitation of Baiyujing as the center of the formation, and joined forces with the Qi of the Qingtian supervisor in the capital, specifically for ascension monks. As for Wan Qiong as the chief worshipper of Dali later, Longquan Jinzong was established on the former site of Lizhu Dongtian, which is far from the kendo sect in Cui Yes' mind. The old Shangshu glanced at the new national teacher Dali. If you talk about your own business, start from scratch. Qin Pingon, who started in a humble alley, is of course outstanding enough, but compared with Cui Yu, it seems to be a little less meaningful. Just thinking about this, the old man immediately felt that it was unreasonable. Qin Pingon asked, "Where is the Mo family?" Xin Chen said, We started to evacuate Dolly one after another a few years ago. The Mo family does things very kindly. They not only helped Dolly cultivate a large number of craftsmen on the mountain, but also left a lot of drawings at the Ministry of Engineering. Chen Pingon smiled, and it seemed that His Majesty the Emperor had said something ingenious and unfeeling. Xianxia said, "It's a pity that the robe of Kaik Mansion was not selected for the customized list of the Confucian Temple." Chen Pingon nodded and said, "Regret is naturally regret, but it's not too unexpected. The last time we discussed the Confucian Temple in China, we ordered 7 kinds of products from all the continents just for the Xianxia ferry. Among them are the mountain ferry and the sword boat jointly built by the Dali Song family and the Mo family. Beiju Luzhou has nearly 20 kinds of mountain refining objects selected. Among them, the only robes are the soft and silky Lingbao armor of Sanlang Temple and the Qinghe robe of Laojun Lane, distributed to the monks of the lower 5 realms. In fact, the robes woven by Kaik Mansion after obtaining a secret refining technique of Jingqiqing robes have improved their rank by a big step, and Kaik Mansion is even willing to build 2,000 pieces for the Confucian Temple without making any money. In addition, during the discussion in the Confucian Temple, Dali Song Chongjing personally recommended the robe of Kaik Fu, but it was still only listed as a candidate list by the Confucian Temple at that time. The explanation given by the Confucian Temple for the rejection is that the cost of the robes of Kaik Fu is too high and the output is too small. Just because Kaik Mansion is a small sect, there are only so many female cultivators of genealogy known as textile mother, and it is indeed impossible to truly meet the mass production qualification required by the Confucian Temple. After getting this statement, the entire female cultivator of Kaik Mansion was very disappointed. But in Qin Pingan's view, this is not a kind of care for Kaik Mansion by the Confucian Temple. Otherwise, once selected, the Confucian Temple will order at least 2,000 robes, and the female cultivator of Kaik House will not have to practice for a few decades, and can only be busy weaving robes day and night. Of course, it was a long-term plan to follow the plan of Qin Pingon and the head of Kaikei's house, Wu Yu. With a kind of very hard and unprofitable, for this Kaik House exchanged a Millennium Foundation. Xianxia asked again, "I heard that Qin Guosher and Jianxiu Lu Su are friends?" Qin Pingon nodded. "I have a personal friendship. The Luoma Heliu clan is one of the few wealthy landowners in Beiju Luzhou. For generations they have been in the business of running boats to catch the sea and running over mountains and mountains, which is equivalent to the largest mountain in Beiju Luzhou. The money may not be as much as Kayonglinzong's, but if you want to talk about the reputation on the mountain, Kayonglinzong is not worthy to carry shoes for the mule, horse and river Lu clan. The present-day head of the Lu clan is close friends with the ancestor of the Yuan clan in Sanlang Temple. The Lu Mahilia family has an honest family style, and the family has a very deep background, but they have never asked the Confucian Temple for a sect title. But the last time the Confucian Temple and the dynasties and immortals of various continents levied cross-continental ferry boats, the Lu Mahelu clan took out 2 boats in one go. One belonged to the expropriation and must be given, and the second boat was given by the Lu clan on his own initiative. There are 2 things about this family that are worth saying. Once, Zhu Luzhou Jianxiu traveled together, contracted, across continents and grabbed a northward from Aizhou. Because there are many sword cultivators who are not high enough, the sea is boundless, and it is extremely exhausting to cross the sea with the sword. All the ferry boats on the mountain at that time were taken out by the Lu family, which covered all the expenses of the excursion. The real fire dragon lying on the ground peak, the surnamed Xianxia of the Tianshifu of Longhu Mountain, is not a sword cultivator, but he is the leader of the sword cultivator of one continent. Zhang took the wine table and pulled the Lu family's head to talk and laugh. One called poor and the other said that I didn't have much money. On that trip across continents, once you asked Jian Yizhou and hit a wall on Azu, all the ferries of Luomahi Liu's family would be destroyed, and it is estimated that none of them would ever return to Jiluzu. So later on, the entire Beiju Luzhou, especially Jianxiu, had to accept the affection, and they were all willing to accept the affection. The second thing is that now the world knows that the wealthy but scumbag Lumahi Lu clan has finally produced a talented and romantic talent. Of course, this person was the young master Lu Su, who had only been in the Great Wall of Sword Qi for more than 20 years. It turns out that we are north of Luzhou on the side of the Jianqi Great Wall. In addition to the Sword Light, which is the best in Juzhou, it turns out that there is such a book business. After Lu Su returned to his hometown, he went to Taihui Jianzong and had 2 drinks with Lu Jinglong, but unfortunately he was not very happy. The old man opened the skylight and said brightly, "The reason why I talked to Qin Guosher about this is because Lu Su, the young master of Luoma River, and Yuan Xian of Sanlang Temple are now wandering around the capital of Dali. Yuan Xian of Sanlang Temple, after all, is still too young, and it is unlikely that he will be the current head of the family. He was cultivated by the next head of the family. However, according to the espionage, Lu Su was already the head of the Lu family in Luomahi, but he did not care about things for the time being, saying that he would have to wait until he entered the Jade Realm." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "I will go to them after I leave the Yamen to catch up with the past and make a little bit of the friendship of the landlords." In addition to the sword cultivator who met at the Jianqi Great Wall and had a private friendship with Qin Pingon, in fact, Qin Pingon was in Beiju Luzhou and he did have many friends. He only said that the last time Luopao Mountain held a Zongmen celebration as a gift, spiritual Duke Yuan Shenlin gave away a large piece of palace pavilion that used to belong to the Nanchuan Water Hall. Li Yuan, Marquis of Longting of Dadu, presented a green river with rich water transport. Also, Xianfeng Yuan Lingdian, Lu Jiqing etc., their names were not on the booklet that Qin Pingon had previously published. The old man suddenly asked, Qin Wenqian first jumped from a hebo to the Qiping Lake Lord of Laoyu Lake, and then directly became Qian Tang. "Sir, can you pass through the Confucian Temple?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Mostly it will be approved. If it is rejected, the court will simply select an orthodox water from Zhujiang Wuyun and the Suho water god recommended by the Ministry of Rites to fill the gap. It is not a hassle." Xiaomo knew the reason. My son still said it implicitly. Sun Wenqian didn't mostly pass, but he definitely could. In the final stage of the young master's wandering of the 6 classics, the gods crossed the sea and the mountains. Xiaomo once stood at the highest point of the town demon tower with the most holy teacher and Chunyang Lu Yan. At that time, the most holy teacher he personally said a word, and the Confucian Temple will record all those names in the book. In this list, there are not only the great mountain gods like Suishan Zhouyu in the Middle Earth, but also the small mountain gods like Doyen of Dayanling, Gong Xinzhou of Xiang Turaya Mountain, and Wei Wei of the Watershed. Of course, there is also Tsun Wenqian of Laoyuhu. Xinchen stood up and said with a smile, "There are guests, rare guests. It seems that they are looking for Qin Guosher. I will ask someone to help arrange a room. Close the door. Can you drink as you please?" Qin Pingon got up. "Don't be so troublesome. I met a few of them and chatted while walking. The old Xianxia doesn't have to see off guests." The old man smiled and said, "To see a guest you must send a guest. Even if you are not a colleague in the officialdom, there is still a friendship with the hometown." Qin Pingon smiled. Xiago put on his mink hat again. "This old man is quite funny." The old man said it was to see off guests, but in fact it was to the door. Jiang Shangzhen walked at the end and chatted a few more words with the old man. The people who came to the Ministry of War to look for Qin Pingon were all members of the earthly branch of the Great Li, 12 of them, and they were free to enter and leave the government offices in the capital without saying hello. For came today, and for some reason they were all women. The girl Yu Yu, the formation master Han Zhoujin, the female ghost of Bamike on the mountain, and the recently joined Zhou Haijing. She is the only pure martial artist, not talking about appearance, only decoration. This female master is still so jeweled, dazzling. The only worthless item on Zhou Haijing's body was probably the flower letter period silk sachet embroidered with swallow patterns hanging from his waist. Yu was a little aggrieved. She was the one who didn't want to come here the most, but Aunt Feng asked her to come by name to bully others. "It's Aunt Feng who asked us to come to Mr. Chen's side to order a mao." She smiled and said, "Aunt Feng wants to ask Mr. Chen when to go to 100 Flowers Blessed Land." Qin Pingon said, "What is really anxious? Shouldn't it be 100 Flowers Blessed Land? What is Aunt Feng anxious about?" Yu said, "I'm just talking. I don't know what Aunt Feng thinks." Qin Pingon nodded. "Understood, I'll talk to Aunt Feng about this later." Han Zhoujin clenched his fists in thanks. "Last time Sect Master Lu passed by the capital and gave me a lot of advice. Thank you again, Mr. Qin." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "You're welcome. We Lu Jianxian have always liked to help others and are very unpretentious." Han Zhoujin hesitated to speak but gave up after thinking about it. Sect Master Lu is really approachable and has a very charismatic personality. It is a sword fairy, but when it comes to the formation method he is concise and his words are righteous. which has benefited Han Zhoujin a lot. But Sect Master Liu's drinking capacity seems to be average, and his face turns red when he drinks, and he is not as addicted to alcohol as the outside world is rumored to be. Zhou Haijing clasped his fists and shook it vigorously with a bright smile on his face and said, I heard that Mr. Chen will take care of us from now on. The little girl is very grateful for taking care of us. Qin Pingon smiled and said, It's easy to say. Xiago squinted at this young female warrior, who is not very pleasing to the eye. Just like that Guan Yi, he swayed his chest several times when he walked, so you shouldn't think it's too cumbersome. Gai Yen is obviously the most sincere thanks to this Mr. Chen who taught him a business experience. When doing business, he is indeed the most reliable Mr. Chen. I have to ask for advice today. But she also said two fresh news first. As Zhou Haijing said, Qin Pingon, who became a national teacher, will be the immediate boss of their 12 earthly branches, the only one. The Dali court just learned that the first person in the northern land of Beiju Luzhou, Jianxiu Baishang, has passed the customs and successfully broke through. On the other side of Xingyang Mountain, the sect master Zhu Huang went to the full moon peak, and Xia Yuntai, his uncle, quickly convened a discussion in the ancestral hall that did not allow others to speak. I believe that the latest issue of Xianxia D newspapers from Daxian Mansion in Aquarius will sell well. Qin Pingon smiled and said, It has nothing to do with me. As for Baishang, the fight was over long ago, and the news on the mountain was relatively lagging behind. Zhou Haijing and the others looked at each other playfully. Is there no silver 300 taels here? As the Shanshui Di Bao of Fengxue Temple said, Xingyang Mountain and Luopao Mountain have a good relationship, or else Qin Shanju will come to the door to pay homage and congratulations. Next, Qin Pingon asked them about the cultivation status of the rest of the earthly branch monks. Naturally, he would answer any questions he had. There may be only a few cultivators on the Aquarius Mountain Yu, and they are most afraid of this seemingly genial young hidden officer, and even the sword cultivator of Xingyang Mountain can't compare with them. In the end, Gai Yen hurriedly found an opportunity to chat with Mr. Chen about personal matters, and asked how to make the business of the inn better and better. Qin Pingon didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he just said something out of conscience. It was already very good and there was no suggestion. The reputation of her inn is now on the verge of ruining the streets on Dali Mountain, and making money is notoriously dark. But I have to admit that the female cultivators are almost reluctant to stay at that inn, and all the male chi practitioners have become repeat customers. After all, they are eye-catching. Seeing the sincere expression on Gayen's face, it is estimated that if she doesn't speak bluntly, she will propose that the partnership earns money and then divides the accounts. Qin Pingon had to say, Gayen, I just asked you to pay attention to the appearance so as not to when the guests came to the door, they followed a haunted house. I didn't let you go to extremes like this. What do you think? Arranging so many Yingyan Jianyan at the door in one breath, do you feel that it is too heavy? Change Yen looked sad and suddenly lost the enthusiasm to make money. Qin Pingon wrapped his arms around his sleeves, walked side by side with Gai Yen in the corridor and continued, Of course I know that the young women at the entrance of the inn are all uprooted people who have lost their pedigree status. It will give each of them a generous salary, and they are all willing to solicit customers there. Well, except for most of the women who have the idea of repaying your gratitude to you. To put it nasty, there may be some people who want to catch the golden turtle son-in-law on the mountain is actually nothing. In short, it is human nature. Change Yen looks a little better. Qin Pingon smiled and said, I'll just give a few small suggestions. There are only 2 female nuns left at the door to entertain guests, and the rest are diverted to private houses, one at a time, and they are responsible for checking in with the guests. 4 singles face-to-face. As long as it is an immortal master who has entered the inn, they can help, lead the way or accompany you in matters such as tours and visitors in the capital free of charge. So you have to let them know more about the scenery, sights and specialties of the capital, so that you know it by heart and you are familiar with it. Then negotiate with some big restaurants in advance, and the guests who come from your inn, all expenses there, the inn must take a cut, such as the restaurant in Changpu River. It will be very happy for you. Pull the guests over. As for the money, the inn will go back and split the bill with them. It is best to pay it monthly. On any day the dividend will be higher than the monthly salary. They will naturally be more concerned, and they can also take advantage of these. It is a precious opportunity to become more and more familiar with the sects on the mountain and the cultivators of various genealogy, so that they can take the opportunity to manage their own contacts. In every house you use snacks which must have their own characteristics such as clearing offerings in the study, calligraphy and painting antiques, utensils that can be viewed in the mirror and so on. The more the better, put some in each room. Of course don't be too tacky and cumbersome, otherwise it will be too much and it will be counterproductive. Also, put a booklet on the table which is very helpful to each room in the room. Such things are clearly marked with prices and guests can spend money to buy things as long as they see the items they like. In the future, when there are many repeat customers, the hotel will record the personal preferences of any guest in detail every time, and then they can watch the dishes. The next time you enter the door, lead them directly to a private house with their own style. Those big customers who don't take money as money, the more you are willing to give discounts, they will be embarrassed by it. Then recommending guests to save money in the inn's account room, whether the guests themselves or their friends on the mountain, stay in the inn and sign up with you. And you spend some money, find a few sects that have Xianxia Dibao and write a few good articles for you. At the nearby ferry ports and some mountain ferry boats, let people contact them. The inn in particular, it is necessary to have a good relationship with the Changchun Palace, so that in the most expensive houses, there must be a jar of Changchun fairy wine on the table. Then pay attention to attracting female cultivators to the door so as not to ruin the reputation of the mountain and make money to make money. If you can't make money from women, how can you make big money? Then the inn must have its own mirror. You can take the initiative to talk to the yamen of the Ministry of Punishment and say that you can talk about cooperation, and the reward is to borrow some beautiful scenery for the inn for free. The snail shell dojo, you don't need to say anything, they will naturally understand. With the help of the inn to collect espionage on the mountain, the punishment department is all experts, they will grasp the balance so as not to smash the inn's signboard. In this way, food, accommodation and transportation, the inn has its own characteristics. Chen Jian eyes bright. Wow, Mr. Chen's casual is really not casual. Sure enough, the experts know if they have it as soon as they make a move. Xiego said in his heart, Xiaomo, our mountain master is very good at business. Xiaomo smiled and said, you just know. Xiego wondered, is it natural? Xiaomo said, of course not. You have to travel thousands of miles, read thousands of books and meet hundreds of people. Qin Pingon raised his chin and continued to say in his heart, actually there is no real expert in business, there is not one in front of you, why do you want to be far away? Gai Yen glanced at Zhou Haijing who was walking in front and said angrily, it's not the right way to go with her. This speaks the most nasty and annoying. Qin Pingon smiled and said, isn't it the right way to go with her or the way to go with money? As long as she becomes a business partner and enables her to earn money every day, do you think she will quarrel with you and say weird things? Gai Yen said tentatively, then let me try it? Qin Pingon nodded and said, you must try it. Brighten up. Qin Pingon said, Gaian, let me remind you at last that earning money is a good thing, but don't forget your main business and practice well. Gai Yen nodded vigorously and she said cautiously, Mr. Qin, don't you really need to share the profits of the inn? I feel bad for my conscience. Qin Pingon said angrily, cultivation well and strive to break through as soon as possible, it is better than anything else. Out of the gate of the Ministry of Military Affairs, across the street is Honglu Temple. Yu and the others all said goodbye and left. The sun was a bit dazzling. Jiang Shangzhen stretched out his hand to cover his eyebrows and asked with a smile, Miss Xia, I heard that Fei Fei is your second disciple? Xiego grinned and said, that little girl, she's not even a swordsman, I don't recognize her as a disciple, not to mention she doesn't recognize me as a master and neither side recognizes it, so it doesn't count. We all pretended not to know each other when we met on the other side of the Hailuo River. Let me guess, it was that mother-in-law Yangji who talked with the plane tree in Tongyi's Hao? Oh, each and every one of them is indebted. Jiang Shangzhen turned to look at Xiaomo. Xiaomo is puzzled. What does it have to do with me? Xiego rubbed his sable hat and asked, Mountain Master, can I go and catch up with that Aunt Feng? Qin Pingon smiled and said, whatever. Just help me with a message to Aunt Feng. That trip to the blessed land of 100 flowers will be over as soon as possible. When you go back and forth, remember not to make any noise. After all, this is the first place of good for the country. It is not advisable to sway the market. Xiego laughed and said, the mountain owner has been worrying too much and I have never been bad for this person. Xiaomo said, I won't go with her. I don't know her well. I have nothing to chat with her. Xiego disappeared in a flash, silently. But on Qin Pingan's side there is also a girl with a mink hat. Xiago came to the flower shed near the fire temple in an instant, and saw a beautiful woman with all kinds of style, sitting under the grape trellis of the old vines reading a book. When reading, the words are all green. The breeze is breezy and the scenery is infinite. Xiago looked around and said in an extremely mellow and authentic small-town dialect, "Hey, okay, you can choose a place to be quiet in the midst of the noise." Aunt Feng closed the book, raised her head to look at the girl's face by Jing and said softly, "Long time no see." Xiago wiped his nose with his thumb. "Don't hide it, I can smell the aroma of the wine, so I came here." Aunt Feng was indifferent. "Whether there is wine or not, what does it have to do with you?" By Jing. It's not that she hasn't seen Ascension Realm Sword Cultivator, in fact she has gone to many more. Xiago smiled suddenly, clasped his fists in front of him, shook it and said flatteringly, "Aunt Feng, give me some wine to drink, I'm very thirsty." Aunt Feng was caught off guard and the white scene in front of her was too white. Could it be that, like Xiaomo, he used some kind of ancient supernatural power to strip out part of his Xianxia? Xiago sat down beside the stone table with one hand on the table, his fingers tapped on the table in turn, waiting for Aunt Feng to bring out a good wine to serve the guests. Aunt Feng got up and came to the table and asked, "What did Qin Pingan say?" Xiago grinned, posing as if he was listening. "What?" She raised one arm and touched her sleeve with the other. A pocket sword box hidden in the sleeve. Inside the box is an ancient sword named Qingtsang. In ancient times, this short sword was also known as Qingchang, which could make the Daoists in the world regret the green intestines when they saw the sword's light. The sword is the same as the dragon and the box is just a line. It is rumored that Bai Jing has another small sword, which he keeps in his arms and keeps it secret. Aunt Feng smiled and said, "Scare me?" Xiago shook his sleeves and laughed. "I don't dare, I can't kill you anyway." Aunt Feng sighed softly. "For 1,000 years, see the old man again. As for friend or foe, it doesn't seem to matter." Xiago leaned forward, lay on the table and spread his hands. "When I woke up this time, it seems that everyone is unfamiliar except for Xiaomo." Aunt Feng smiled and said, "Have you slept with him?" Xiadog just laughed. In the northern border of Dali, a towering mountain formerly known as Baiyue, Gukan only took the maid with the Taoist name Chunshao by her side, and her aunt Han Qiaosa had already returned to the White Emperor city in the Middle Earth. In a pavilion on the side of an official road, Lu Xianying stood side by side with a young woman in a padded coat with a round face. Waiting for Gukan, Lu Xianying looked at Gukan and the woman. He didn't say anything, just tut tsk over there. The little slug is fine. Sure enough, men turn bad when they have money. Now they know how to bring a beautiful woman when they go out. Will they warm the bed? You must know that according to the customs of their hometown, the younger brother can only marry after the elder brother has completed the marriage. Gukan didn't bother to say anything to Lu Xianying, she just looked at the bright moon from the wild, clasped her fists and smiled. "Gukan and Mud Bottle Lane, I have seen my future sister-in-law." "Credit you," said with a smile. "I am now a pseudonym Yu Qianyue. Of course you can call me Daoist Credit Moon in private." The first impression of Gukan is good, much stronger than someone else. The maid gave 1,000 blessings. "The slave is effective, I have seen Lu Jianxian and Sister Liue." Of course she knew the credit month, but the credit month didn't know the junior in her hometown. Lu Xianying smiled and glanced at the woman who claimed to be efficacious. As for her feet, realm and background, it didn't matter. She clasped her fists in return and smiled politely. "I've seen fellow Daoist efficacious." Efficacy does not yet know the severity of the benefits. Instead, she just felt that Lu Xianying would be easier to get along with than that young hidden official. The young sect master of Longquan Sword Sect in front of him is definitely not a simple jade pure realm sword cultivator. A glance is enough. Gukan didn't talk nonsense. She took out a wooden box from her bosom, threw it to Lu Xianying and said in her heart, "What you told me has been done." Lu Xianying smiled as usual but just took the wooden box in his hand, put it in his sleeve at will, strode a meteor, stretched out his hand to wrap his arms around Gukan's neck and asked with a soft smile, "Is it easy?" Gukan said angrily, "Don't worry about it." After entering Baidi City to cultivate, Gukan never asked that master. This thing is the only exception. No way. Lu Xianying threatened him that if he didn't do this he wouldn't even think about being the best man for him. Lu Xianying lowered his voice and asked, "Aren't you afraid that Qin Pingan will find out and turn his face with you?" Gukan said indifferently, What the consequences will be, I will only know better than you. After hearing this answer, Lu Xianying nodded and patted Guken on the head. Yes, I didn't make a friend like you in vain. Guken pushed Lu Xianying's hand away and reminded in her heart. It's just a portrait after all, and the effect may not be very good. Lu Xianying snorted, then turned to Guken and said, I only know better than you about this kind of thing. Guken said in a heartfelt voice. As a reward, Master asked me to ask you one thing. Have you ever met the of the changer who sits in the long river of time? Lu Xianying looked dignified, shook his head and said, It's not appropriate to talk about this here. When we arrive at Yui Peak, forget it, we'll go to Xianxia Mountain to talk about it. Guken said, Now that you have the answer, you don't need to bother so much. Master only needs to know that existence and whether it still exists. I'm only responsible for helping Master determine whether it exists or not. As for the rest, if Master wants to know more inside information, he will naturally come to you. Lu Xianying stretched out his palm and rubbed his chin. Does the city lord buy drink? Do you have a fairy brew that you are particularly fond of? If there is, you can help me make a few jars. Guken scolded her in her hometown dialect. According to the way the three of them got along, she actually agreed. Lu Xianying held the back of his head with both hands, and Guken beside him was more like a scholar. It is also the credit month and the efficacies of the fellow villagers, and they walk behind their respective Daoist companions and masters. Lu Xianying said lazily, If I had been there, I would have never needed Chao Ci to deliver that punch, then those locust leaves of yours would be useless. Guken said, You are the best at talking big and bragging. Apparently, Qin Pingon had already informed Lu Xianying of the wild fight where they met on a narrow road. Probably because he was worried that Lu Xianying would not invite him to be the best man? Lu Xianying thief smiled and said, Where are you and this sister? Guken sneered, It's the same as you and Xinyue. Lu Xianying felt a little shriveled. When it comes to quarreling, Guken is very talented. Back then he and Qin Pingon together were not as good as a slug. Of course he was no different with Qin Pingon, who was a boring gourd at that time. Guken hesitated for a moment, then said, Let me tell you a little bit of my own guesses. The credit moon by your side, her chance of becoming enlightened in the future, may be related to the Immortal tomb in our hometown, and the Xiangjuan of Lingfei Palace with the Taoist name of Dongting, as well as the Qiyun Mountain formerly known as Baiyu in front of you. It has something to do with it. As for how to connect them together, how to extend more clues, you want to go. Lu Xianying nodded and said, Mr. Qi's placing Miss Yu in our hometown must have a profound meaning. I remember that there was a time at the blacksmith shop where we were eating old duck bamboo shoots together. Miss Yu mentioned one thing. Jiang Shangzhen once said something to her that looked like a poem of wandering immortals and a function of step. In the end, when Lu Xianying asked her what it was, Miss Yu said that it was about ascending to the sky, making up for the lack of money, moonlight and white clouds, etc. I don't remember clearly. All of a sudden Lu Xianying, who thought he was generous enough, was completely stunned. Later Lu Xianying went to ask Qin Pingon about the matter, and helped to ask for the whole content. Lu Xianying suddenly slapped him and taught him a lesson from his heart. What kind of credit month, no big or small, call me sister-in-law. Guken just lowered her head and avoided Lu Xianying's attack. She turned her head and smiled and said, Sister-in-law, would you like me to talk to you about some old things about Mud Bottle Alley? It's actually quite interesting. Lu Xianying laughed, hurriedly stretched out his hand to restrain Guken's neck, lowered his voice and said, The slugs. They are all my own brothers, so what if I call you Big Brother Gu? She said with a smile, Isn't it Wang Zhu? I know. Lu Xianying used to go to Mud Bottle Alley to see her. Guken turned her head and smiled. So my sister-in-law knows, so there's nothing to talk about. Lu Xianying let go of Guken, sniffed at himself, wiped his face fiercely and stared blankly ahead. What is the use of me wanting this sword fairy realm and sect master status? Without waiting for Guken to gloat over the misfortune, Lu Xianying first stretched out his hand to go around it, and then he let out a sullen fart and then reached out and slapped his face in a lightning-fast manner. When Guken scolded a hometown dialect and was about to fight back, Lu Xianying had already left with Yu Jian. Guken thought about it but still didn't chase after him. As a child it was always like this. Slug, stop crying, come and wipe your face with your sleeve. There was a fart sound and then another snap, and the clenched fist spread out into the palm of the hand, covering the face of the little slug. After all, I was young at that time and suffered many losses. The child was always crying heartbroken, so someone comforted him, saying that he was fine, and he would definitely help him teach Lu Xianying, who had run away laughing, a lesson. But every time he went up and down the mountain, all the harvest that person in Lu Xianying would let the child with two snots take home. Lu Xianying has never been a stingy person. Otherwise, why did the slugs of the past talk so easily to Song Pangchai, who was also in the mud bottle alley? In the capital of Dali, after Qin Pingon left the military office in Kejiao Lane, Xianxia still called to Lord Shangshu. While waiting for people in the house, Xianxia stood over the desk, stretched out his hand and rubbed an ancient ink stone. It is said that it was the first official document of the Ministry of War of Dali. The old man died in the office. At that time, there was still an unfinished official document of the Ministry of War. Then somehow this Fang Yantai was passed down from generation to generation and stayed in the military yamen. It is said that such a small ancient inkstone, which is said to have been made for hundreds of years, does not know how many old men like Xianxia have been sent away. Xianxia heard two kinds of footsteps that were all too familiar outside the house, recovered, walked around the desk and walked towards a chair. After stepping over the threshold and entering the house, the Minister of Works when Air asked directly, did he not nod to help contact Beiju Luzhou Sanlang Temple and the Luoma Heliu clan? Xianxia smiled and said, the thief. How could it be so easy to nod? Qin Guosher is not stunned. After listening to a few good words, he happily patted his chest and agreed. The Minister of the Household Mu Yan asked, what about Yu Guizhong and Yanggu Blessed Land, who also refused? Xianxia said, it's half and half. Jiang Shangzhen said that it doesn't work for him to talk to Yu Guizhong. The implication is that we should find someone to talk to ourselves. But they're Jiang's Cloud Cave Blessed Land. There is no problem, they are very willing to sit down with our bigly and have a good talk about specific cooperation matters. Because you, the god of wealth in charge of money bags, was not present, Jiang Shangzhen did not say that he would come forward, but only said that the person in charge of the Jiang family would go for a while to the capital. Speaking of this, Xianxia couldn't help laughing and said, we can't just because a great sword immortal who was a suzerain and who has outstanding military exploits, sits at the door of the imperial study today and doesn't say a word, we can't take him back. Thing. When Air nodded and said, it's Jiang Shangzhen after all. Now that they have all come, the three ministers, one host and two guests, talked about some important military affairs. When and Mu Yan got up and left, the old Shangshu didn't get up. The old man sat on the chair, closed his eyes and rested for a moment, then slowly got up and walked to the bookshelf. There were a few thin and colorful books hidden there which were very inconspicuous. Dip in saliva and open a page. The book describes the woman's appearance and demeanor, which is a must. Some of the blank descriptions that do not seem to be very fragrant are even more aftertaste. For example, the current old Shangshu is reading the length of writing about a cloud and rain. The lover has fled over the wall. The woman in the boudoir is dressing in the mirror and the mirror is in the mirror. There is a beautiful woman, her face is pink, her temples are sweaty and she seems to be in pain. The woman stretches out her hand and lightly rubs her chest, frowning slightly as if resentful and ashamed. This book, which is difficult to weight for elegance, was first spread from Beiju Luzhou to the Xinjia ferry in Aquarius. The one who compiled this novel was Jiang Shangzhen, who made waves in Beiju Luzhou with the cultivation base of Jindan. The old man turned a few more pages before putting the book back on the shelf. In fact, the question Jiang Shangzhen asked earlier was, what's the point of being an official? The old minister of the military department of Dili did not give a serious answer. Not to mention other continents and other countries, but it is very interesting to say that we are officials in the Dali court, especially in the Ministry of War. The old man leaned his back against the bookshelf, dazed. Xianxia, the word Haiyi. According to the explanation of words in some poems and articles as well as Jinshi, the words Xin and Xin can actually be interchanged. Since the surname is Xin and the name is Xin, a character is naturally needed to complement the name. Xin Chen's eyes shifted, looking towards the door. Back then, in a fit of anger, Xin Chen, who was an official in the Ministry of Personnel at the time, had a political disagreement with the national teacher Cui Yu, and Xin Chen resigned directly from the office. Fuck the countrymen. Later, Cui Yu personally brought Xin Chen to the Ministry of Military Affairs. Before crossing the threshold and entering the house, Cui Yu stopped and asked Xin Chen if he had thought about it. You, a literati who has never touched a knife or war armor, it is not easy to get a firm seat in this room. Xin Chen said that as long as Cui Guosher promised me one thing, those warriors would come into the house with knives and chop me at every turn. and I would have the ability to manage the military department of a country well. It is also a national teacher of Dali or a brother from the same sect. Qin Pingon is young and he can't compare to his brother Chuiyu. It's a bit far behind. Compared with Howren embroidered tiger, is he bullying people? Shit, who made you Qin Pingon sit on that chair today? No one else. If you don't compare you with Chuiyu, it's hard to compare with me. But having said that, when I saw him today, the old man's impression of Qin Pingon was not bad, so he certainly wouldn't be disappointed. The old man walked to the desk, stopped suddenly, rubbed his eyes and squinted to make sure he didn't have dizziness. Because at some point on the table, there was an extra square stamp with a qilong button. Chen walked over slowly, not in a hurry to pick up the seal, put his hands behind him and looked down at it as if the inscription were divided into the side part. The title is 2 sentences. The sages have their words, and the scholars must be brave and persevering. The history books do not contain a word, and the above generals seal the prince. There is one more sentence. Dali Qin Pingon was engraved in the style of an ancient general and taught by Mr. Hong Yi. Xianxia smiled and nodded. Not bad. The old man was not surprised. The old Xianxia has read countless books in his life and there are many good words and sentences in the book, but these few sentences are not bad. Flattery, how can it be called flattery? It must be good words. Then Xianxia picked up the seal and looked at the content of the inscription. For a moment the old man was speechless for a long time. He gently put it down, straightened it a little and was silent for a long time. In the end he was willing to put the seal back on the table. He glanced at the door and then at the seat. Chuiyu and Qin Pingon are worthy of being brothers from the same school. Xianxia, who led a country's military department as a scholar, didn't have time to ask a certain question with the national teacher Chuiyu. How am I doing as the Minister of War? And the 7-character seal on the bottom of the paragraph is like an answer given in place of Chuiyu. The scholar here is a hero. Sort of coming. Chapter 1180. The warm sun is shining, the spring is swaying, the flower letter has a period, and the plum and peach blossoms bloom one after another. In the Beijing Lilikang, where there are many bookstores, a handsome young man hangs a purple gourd wine jug with a glossy pulp on his waist. He sits at the door of the shop under the sun, and eats a bowl of pea yellow that he bought on the way. While haggling with the shopkeeper of the shop that I know in the house, saying that the books I like are old girls who can't get married, and flirting with the proprietress who set up a roadside stall to sell books in the bookstore next door, and at the same time here waiting for the rabbit to stand still, kill 3 birds with 1 stone. He borrowed a bench for the shopkeeper of the young drunkard's shop, sat behind the counter and carefully wiped a piece of imitation official porcelain, raised his head, and looked at the rogue guy outside the door who was looking sideways with the shop beside him and said with a smile, "Chao Shilang, if you dare to touch her hand in broad daylight and hug her a few more times, I will sell you all these books from my shop at a 50% discount. How about that?" The young man picked up a piece of pea yellow and threw it into his mouth. He smiled and said, "Forget it during the day, bad reputation, can you go to the corner at night?" The voices of the 2 men outside the door were not small, and they obviously did not deliberately avoid the MILF. The woman heard the words and grabbed a book from the stall, laughed and scolded her as if she was dead and smashed the book at the door. That handsome man who has no righteous behavior all day long. Is it interesting that one has no eggs and one has no guts? That Chao Shilang is not a nickname, but a genuine official servant of the Dali officialdom, and the official is in charge of the official's personnel department. The young man caught the hidden weapon without reading the title of the book. He just took a sniff and threw the book back to the beautiful woman's stall. Sporing. Chao Jengson's eyes shifted a little and he saw a few people walking out from an antique shop in the distance. All of them were foreigners from Beiju Luzhou. A tall middle-aged man wearing an old mink hat with a lot of wear on his head, a padded jacket and a pair of suede boots on his feet. The man's face is not bitter at all, but he is poor. It was the Lu Mahelu clan swordsman Lu Su. Yuan Xian of Sanlang Temple with the appearance of a teenager wearing a mud gold robe. On this trip south to cross continents to visit Beipingzu, the heir to the Sanlang Temple nicknamed Yuan Ichi, and Yuan Zhangxue, still brought only 2 followers, Fan Yu and Wu Fu, who traveled far away. This female martial arts master had been to the Dali Suedu and Dadu battlefields and forgot to die. Therefore there was a detailed record of the Dali rites. Fan Yu visited the mountains and rivers in Dali. After getting the customs clearance letter, if Fan Yu publicly reveals her identity, she must treat each other with courtesy. If she intends to travel in brocade clothes at night, she does not need to disturb her travels. The high-ranking gods in Dali always have such a gift list, which is convenient for viewing and entertaining guests at any time. Whether it is a mountain monk in a foreign country or a warrior in the rivers and lakes, as long as he has repaid the greatly with morality and righteousness on the battlefield, the court should treat him as a state scholar and treat him with courtesy. Yuan Ing Jing Lao Jianxiu Lu Wuding is different from Fan Yu, who is similar to a family son. The old man is the first-class worshipper of Sanlang Temple. The annual salary is quite considerable and he takes a lot of money. The disciple protector used to be Yuan Ichu, but now it's just Yuan Xian. When Lao Jianxiu was young, he used to be a cultivator of genealogy, and then he became a lonely and wild ghost Xianxia Yeshio. It was because Lu Wuding had just entered the Golden Core realm, and it was only a few days after he left the border. I secretly went to demolish the ancestral hall of another family. It was the first time I did this kind of thing. I didn't have enough experience in the rivers and lakes. I was careless and didn't hide my identity well. Originally a descendant of the patriarch who was expected to inherit the head, a young genius with a bright future had to be expelled from the mountain gate and was silent. But looking back at the questioning sword 200 years ago, the old man never regretted it. So young and vigorous the old man has been young. Chao Gingxin hurriedly swallowed the last mouthful of pea yellow, tossed his sleeves, stood up and shook his robe, smiled and beckoned. Lu Jianxian Yuan Gongzi Lu Jianxian Fan Zongshi. Hao Lu and Lu Tongyin, I would have called only one if I knew it earlier. The young waiter used a very authentic Beiju Luzhou elegant language. Lu Su frowned and asked, "Who are you? Enshrined by the Ministry of Punishment? Want to check our identities?" The people on the mountain who dealt with the monks from other villages in the Dali dynasty were usually worshipped by the Ministry of Punishment. Heaven comes, Yuan Xian had already recognized the identity of the other party and said with a smile, "Uncle Lu, not from the Ministry of Punishment, but Chao Shilang from the Department of Officials in the capital of Dali, a well-known person on the mountain. This person is indeed very famous, and he was able to make an exception for the Song Dynasty Emperor Dali to allow Chao Gingxin to bring a jug to the yamen, but it was stipulated that he could only drink 1 jug of wine a day and no refills were allowed on that day. As a reward, he gave Chao Shilang a jar of Chongchun Palace Fairy Brew, euphemistically called fishing with wine, so that Chao Gingxin would not make excuses to ask for leave and not go to Mao. According to official rumors, Chao Gingxin, who returned to Beijing to become a servant, had prepared more than a dozen reasons early to shirk all kinds of official duties that he felt would be the same with him or without him. In the north of Luzhou North, the north-south Zhongtiao mountain runs along a large river. The mountain is narrow and long, and the whole majestic mountain range is like a looking at the eyebrows. Lomahi Lushur and Sanlang Temple Yuanshur are located in the mountains with extremely rich minerals, occupying the cornucopia and the arsenal respectively. Chao Gingxin gave Yuan Xian a thumbs up. "Young man is very knowledgeable." Yuan Xian said with a smile, "Chao Shilang in fact am not too young." Chao Gingxin nodded and said, "Then we are the same, tender-faced, and take advantage of it." Lu Su asked, "From the Ministry of Officials? What are you asking us to do?" Chao Gingxin smiled and said, "Actually I wasn't looking for you, I was waiting for someone with you. I've been a neighbor with him for many years but I've never seen him." Yuan Xian asked, "Could it be that Qin Shanju?" Chao Gingxin smiled and said, "Young Master Yuan is really smart, you can guess right away." Yuan Xian slandered in his heart, "Whoever we are looking for you will wait for, it is hard to guess. What's more, the Longquan County Kiln Supervision and Construction Office is not a neighbor to the Luopao Mountain." Lu Su said, "What are you doing to see him?" Actually, this question is a bit out of date. Chao Gingxin of the Ministry of Personnel did not care what Lu Su did when he came to Dali, and of course Lu Su, the sword repairer, did not care who Chao Gingxin wanted to see. But it can be seen that the relationship between Lu Su and Chen Pingon is definitely not as ordinary as what he and Yuan Xian said. However, Chao Gingxin didn't look annoyed, patted the wine gourd on his waist, turned his head and smiled at the beautiful woman who set up a stall to dry books and asked, "Manager Nangong, how do you say something?" The woman said with a smile, "One of Susie's famous articles is orderly. The woman said that I have had a bucket of wine in storage for a long time, so that my son needs it from time to time." Chao Gingxin smiled and said, "I still need to introduce myself. My name is Chao Gingxin. It is relatively unhappy and unwilling to be a minister. and if there is no noble person in the DPRK, it is difficult to want to be an official. Chao Gingxin turned his head and said with a smile, "The Lord is here." Lu Su and Lu Wuding looked at each other. This surname Chao is not only a qi practitioner but also has a high realm. Chao Gingxin glanced at Lu Su and Lu Wuding. Once upon a time, a qi practitioner in the nascent soul realm, let alone a sword cultivator, was already unattainable. Now looking at these old gods, it seems like that. Just like when Chao Gingxin was young, I remember the first time I went to visit Lu Jia at the alley outside the building. Because I knew the realm of the old in advance, I was still a little nervous. I had to worry about the etiquette when I brought 2 pots of good wine. If it's not enough, will I have a closed door? Looking at it now, I can drink wine with Brother Lu. When he was young, Chao Gingxin was a little worried about what he saw, heard, and talked about state affairs with the elders of the family. Today, the children of our Dali dynasty have already regarded the Dali dynasty as one of the most powerful countries in the world, and regard this kind of thing as the most natural thing. In particular, the Inichi Lane and Cheer Street began to calculate their respective pros and cons with the Daoist dynasty and the Xuanmi dynasty in Middle-earth, guessing when Dali would catch up. Actually, it wasn't like this before. I remember that when Chao Gingxin was young, he and his grandfather once asked about the official anecdote that was famous for the government and the opposition. Since Xianxia had resigned from the Ministry of Officials, and with his stubborn personality, he had established an academy in his hometown. Why did he want to return to the officialdom? It was really Cui Guosher who personally came forward and invited Xianxia to be in charge of the Ministry of Military Affairs in Beijing. After all, Chao Gengxin's grandfather is the owner of the Chao family in Shangzhou Kingdom. The outside world can only rely on guesswork, but this old man can ask Xianxia the truth in person. It turned out that Cui Guosher had visited the local academy and indeed personally invited Xianxia to return to the officialdom. And the reason for persuading the stubborn Xianxia was very simple. Cui Yu asked Xianxia to lift his eyelids, so he might as well take a longer view. Since it will soon be the land of Dali, why do you still care about those trivial things? If the anecdote is limited to this, Chao Gingxin actually thinks that Cui Guo's teacher is brilliant, and it will not make the boy feel numb in his scalp and cold in his back. It turned out that the old man told his most important grandson a more trivial matter, saying that when Cui Guosher appeared in that private academy, the academy that he had worked so hard to establish had already been turned into a government-run academy, and the new appointment was made. The mountain chief is already on his way to his post, and that mountain chief is a great scholar in the literary world who was originally disliked by Xianxia, a grandfather and grandson of 3 generations and 5 scholars. Personal grievances. It is estimated that Xianxia will be disgusted to the point of death. Cui Yu has given you one choice and there is absolutely no second choice to choose from. You are either suffocated to death in your hometown or you obediently go to the capital of Dali to become a high-ranking official, serve the country, the people, yourself, the society and the common people, and the 3 immortality. Therefore Chao Gingxin came to a conclusion very early that the smarter the person, the more afraid of Cui Guosher. Chao Gingxin has been the kiln supervisor for so many years. Does he really think that Chao Duzhao doesn't want to make a successful career? It is nothing more than that Chao Gingxin is smart enough to not dare to be smart. After leaving the Thousand Steps Gallery, Jiang Shangzhen said that he was going to Changchun Palace to do some private affairs. Xiego is still at the Fire Temple. Qin Pingon only brought Xiao Emo by his side, and came here to find Lu Su and his party. Chao Geng bowed his heart and took the initiative to apologize. I have been an official in a small town for many years, and I did not go to Luopao Mountain to visit Shangzhou, which is a lot of rude. I don't have to go to the Office of Supervision and Construction to visit my parents, so it should be even. Qin Pingon returned the salute and asked with a smile, "Why is Shilang Chao here waiting for me waiting here?" Chao Gingxin smiled and said, "As expected, I can't hide it from Master Qin Shangzhou." Qin Pingon asked, "Anything to discuss?" Chao Gingxin shook his head and smiled and said, "I just met once, said hello and I am satisfied. If Qin Shangzhou needs to invite a friend to drink, he will only say that there are large and small restaurants over the Changpu River, and if you report my name you can book your account. No money." Qin Pingon wondered, Chao Shilang's salary is so high? Chao Gingxin said boldly, "Qin Shangzhou and his friends drink and drink, the restaurant keeps the accounts, the officials Chao Shilang owes the debts, and the poor Chao Gingxin pays back the money." Hearing this, Lu Su was in awe. He and Chao Gingxin were not the same and they didn't have the same taste. You didn't need to talk too much to know that they could not be friends, but Chao Gingxin and the second shopkeeper would definitely get along well. Qin Pingon cupped his hands and smiled. Ching Ching, thank you here. After that, Qin Pingon took Lu Su and the others away from Lulakang and asked Lu Su if he had chosen a good inn. Lu Su said that there was no inn for the time being. Now it is very famous on Beiping's mountain. Of course Lu Su didn't care anyway. Yuan Xian was the one who paid, and Yuan Xian naturally didn't care. He didn't spend a lot of ferry money on a trip to Lulakang, and he was worried that he had nowhere to spend. Chao Shilang returned the small bench to the shop, and finally got what he wanted and bought the books that he had long loved. Seeing this, the proprietress of the shop next door set up a stall and asked curiously, how did the iron rooster pluck his hair, and what kind of ecstasy soup was given to him? Chao Gingxin said with a smile. I told Lao Hong that the person who was standing and chatting with me at the door of his shop just now was the owner of Luopao Mountain. As soon as Lao Hong was happy, he gave me away for nothing. It's really not slander? The woman was suspicious and hurriedly turned her head to look at the back of the blue shirt in the distance and murmured, it's not so handsome. I don't think it's as good as you. I remember that in the past Lulakang bookstore sold a book of landscape travels and the sales were quite good. Please come by yourself. The Unstoppable Affair. Chao Gingxin put the book into his arms and smiled. Be a down-to-earth person, a happy person with a wide heart and a fat body. Eat well, drink well and sleep well. Walking out of the noisy Lulakang boundary, Lu Su asked, are we really going to the Changpu River for a drink? Qin Pingon smiled and said, what are you thinking? You can go there with your knees. If you really want to report Tao Jenkson's name, it's useless, and 9 out of 10 restaurants must drive people away. What's more, the restaurant on the side of the Changpu River is relatively heavy, and there are not many places to drink vegetarian wine. Chao Shilang obviously believes that Shan Juchen dare not go there too much. Yuan Xian took courage and asked shyly, Master Chen Shan, do you still remember me? The last time I was fishing at Tonglu Lake, the person I introduced myself was called Yuan Xian from Sanlang Temple. Qin Pingon nodded and smiled. Of course I remember. I have a deep memory. At that time young Master Yuan was very young and he was an old man. He was kind-hearted, but he was well-mannered. Yuan Xian suddenly looked bright and turned to look at the few people around him. How about it? Or is it a polite word? Lao Jianxiu pretended to be surprised. Fan Yu nodded lightly and was very supportive. Lu Su was a little speechless. How can you be sure? Isn't this still a polite word? A little fool like Yuan Xian, when he arrives at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, no matter how much money he has in his pocket, it is useless. He is no better than Wei Jianxian of the Wind Snow Temple, and he will become a number on the account book of the second shopkeeper. The two sides met for the first time in the verdant lake in the Valley of Ghosts. According to the records in the Reassurance Collection, there is a local special product of clam fish, which is full of treasures. According to legends on the mountain, the most mysterious thing is that Qi practitioners eat this fish and they can get rid of it. The entanglement of any nightmare in the world. The higher the cultivator's realm, the more dreamless he becomes. If the cultivator still has more dreams in the fairyland, it is natural that his practice has gone wrong. At that time, Qin Pingon went to Tonglu Lake to try his luck. It was best to catch fish, but it didn't matter if he couldn't. And the last time Yuan Xian traveled to the Valley of Ghosts, it was also by chance. But not as indifferent as Qin Pingon. Because of his great-aunt Yuan Yizhu, she has been plagued by nightmares for 100 years, which has led to the delay in breaking the bottleneck of nascent soul. Although ordinary people can't see the slightest abnormality in her, Yuan Yizhu is actually haggard. If someone skilled can see the truth, she is a skinny and tragic state. It's just that women love beauty and she used a talisman method, but this is an illusion of self-deception. So within 100 years she has only appeared a few times occasionally, even in the ancestral hall. The last time she appeared was when Lu Jinglong visited the Sanlang Temple, and Yuan Yizhu would only be strong. Even if she didn't want him to see his inhuman face, she hoped to give him a few last glances. Since Gao Qing, the heroic spirit of the Ghost Valley, disappeared inexplicably and voluntarily abandoned a Jingguan city, this group of dragons and headless Ghost Valley was no longer able to compete with the Mui Mountain, and the Pima Zone completely took over the entire small world. The Sanlang Temple has a good relationship with the Pima sect. Anyway, there is no more interference from Gao Qing. At that time Zhu Quan, who had not yet stepped down as the suzerain, heard about this, so he simply came to a thorough drying up and fishing, Letting the crowd, the monks used the water-moving method and used nets to catch fish. As a result, they caught a lot of the silver carp known as the little lake scorpion. The meat was thicker and it was not suitable for the eyes of the gluttons. The only valuable ones were only the 2 fish whiskers. After the silver carp survived for 100 years, can be used to make treasures such as demon binding ropes, immortal binding ropes, or whiskers. Among them are a few silver carp, which are huge and weigh more than 500 genes. However, compared with the unique clamfish in Tonglu Lake, many large lakes in Beijing-Luzhou have silver carp, and they can only be regarded as ordinary things. As for the buckwheat, a pair were also salvaged, but they were not old enough, so they were carefully brought back to the family by the Yuan cultivator. Yuan Yizhu glanced at the 2 buckwheat and said it was useless. Yuan Yizhu just kept the pair of swimming fish in the courtyard fish tank and teased them in his spare time. Yuan Xian's face was embarrassed. Master Chen, my trip to Aquarius Island is actually looking for you to see the old site of Lizhu Cave and then go to Luopao Mountain. Seeing Yuan Xian twitching and unable to let out a fart for a long time, Lu Su helped him and said, he has an elder with good cultivating aptitude in Sanlang Temple, called Yuan Yizhu, a female sword cultivator with excellent aptitude. About 100 years ago she was in a secret realm ruins, and her Taoist heart was infiltrated by some kind of weirdness. After that, as long as she fell asleep or concentrated her energy, she would be disturbed by nightmares. It is difficult, so it has been stagnant in the nascent soul realm for too many years. Judging from the current situation, Yuan Yiz's soul will become a muddy mess within a few years, and the immortals will be hard to save. Therefore, a long enough age is needed. As for this fish being able to expel the haunting nightmare, the rumors are true or false. In short, a dead horse is a living horse doctor. Qin Pingon asked in doubt, you didn't ask someone to help you? Yuan's reputation on the mountain is so good, it is reasonable to say that the passive a cultivator of the nascent soul realm. Please ask the cultivator of the ascension realm, and it will be enough to drop 10 times. Lu Su shook his head and said, Yuan Yizhu is after all a woman in a boudoir, and I guess she has something to hide, so she doesn't want to go to Pitafeng to find the real Huolong. And Sanlang Temple didn't say hello to the heavenly monarch of the Zhou department. At first, the ancestor of the Sanlang Temple wanted to discuss the matter behind Yuan Yiku's back, but Yuan Yichu, who had expected it, had already said a few harsh words, and the ancestor of the Yuan family had to give up. Her stubborn temper, no one can beat it. Qin Pingon became more and more confused and asked, then why did you think of coming to me? Huolong Jinren and Zhou Xian department Yang Tianjun are men, so am I a woman? Although on the battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the young hidden officer did pretend to be a female sword cultivator. Originally it was very well hidden, but it was leaked out for some reason. If it is said that he was confused by strange nightmares and hurt his heart, Qin Pingan's first thought was that Lu Qin could help interpret the dream, and I believe that he would definitely be able to catch it. It is a pity that Master Lu has returned to the Qingming world at this moment. Then there is the student Cui Dongshan, who is very accomplished in the spirit of the soul. But if Yuan Yizhu didn't want to let the male Qi practitioners help, it would be very troublesome. Otherwise, Xiaomo's spinning the cocoon is also a must. Lu Su said, that old man who proclaimed himself the great king of Heihe used the old dragon cave as a dojo. It raised a pair of golden lobsters that were old enough to give his daughter a dowry. It was only in the old dragon cave that the old man was born. Yuan has been raised for 800 years, and it is estimated that they are the ancestors of the squid. But according to some gossip, it is rumored that you went to the Ghost Valley back then, and the old Yuan returned to the temple to practice. Sanlang Temple, the ancestor of the Yuan family, went there personally, and only after asking, did he find out that even a piece of celadone water that was used as a fish tank was stolen, along with the clam fish, and Lao Yuan could not do anything about it. As for the Xiao Yuan, whose name is Fu Hai Yuan Jun, and a very cherished carved mother copper coin in the Laolong cave, they mysteriously disappeared at the same time, and their whereabouts are still unknown. Lao Yuan also prayed to Yuan Laozu to help find it. The whereabouts of its daughter. This is the dowry that Lao Yuan gave her, so she won't be a thief. If it is said that she eloped with someone, then Xiao Yuan has formed the appearance of a queen, and she is also a first-class hero. Now I want to know each other. Hearing this, Qin Pingon knew it, and his face was a little embarrassed. Qin Shanzhu, who is upright and beautiful, has a few things that he is reluctant to mention. Except for the fake female cultivator at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, most of the things that happened in Beiju, in addition to the trip to the Ghost Valley. Also I was invited by the ghosts in the mountains to fight poems, and then I was doing business with Dao Changsun's partner at the Xianfu site. At that time I was still young, I just felt that the world was big and I was not in my hometown, who would know or remember to do it myself. What? When Lao Tzu traveled to Beiju, he just acted as a foolish old man and occasionally picked up junk. How could he be the same as the black-clothed scholar who didn't get away with nothing and didn't grow an inch of grass? On that trip to the Valley of Mysterious Creatures, he and the Yi Xiu, who called himself Yang Mumao, who was formed by beheading 3 corpses, were intrigued all the way, not only working together to make money, but also changing ways to pit each other. One is Yang Mumao, who sees injustice on the road, and the other who faints when he sees blood. As for the last time the two sides met again, it was already in the Ascension City in the colorful world. Qin Pingon said, Yuan Xian, I only have a clue about the return of the pair of columbine fish, but I haven't been able to determine anything yet. I can ask you for it right away. Just wait for my news in the near future. 3 mountain mirrors, a pair of golden crayfish from the old dragon cave, and the priceless carving mother which was once cast by a hidden immortal of Qing Dizong, and there are many harvests, all of which are black-clothed scholar Yang Mumao, and it was easy to earn from the robbery in the Ghost Valley. Compared with Qin Haoran's stop-and-go picking up small junk, he can earn some hard money with a hammer in the east and a hammer in the west, which is incomparable. Although Qin Pingon still doesn't know the whereabouts of the little turtle and a pair of cockles, he guesses that it is doomed to be inseparable from the Yunshao Palace. Moreover, he is now, in name, the boxing master of a certain prince of the Daoist dynasty. In fact, after that Xiao Yuan took refuge in Yang Mumao, he did get a piece of landscape creation. Just as the black-clothed scholar said by the river at the time, he kept many imperial edicts with jade seals in his house, and he accumulated a lot of freshmen. I just fill in a name and you can take office and become of mountains and rivers. According to the agreement, or threatened by the ruthless Yang Mumao, Xiao Yuan did not dare to reveal his whereabouts after leaving the Ghost Valley. As for the 2 dowry fish, they have nothing to do with her anymore, and they are now kept in a pond in the Zhou Xian administration. How many world affairs and people's hearts have gone around in a circle, but they are still in place. Yuan Xian bowed his hands and thanked him. On the way here, Uncle Lu said that the second shopkeeper will either not nod, but as long as he nods the matter is safe. Qin Pingon smiled and said that you don't have to be so outspoken, I am a regular customer of your Suburo temple. Yuan Xian curiously asked why he said this, and Qin Pingon took out Lu Jianxian and said that he asked him to help buy 2 pieces of Lingbao armor. As soon as Yuan Xian asked the price, he nodded and said that the ant's face was still great, so if he came to bargain, it would cost more than a dozen guyes money. Qin Pingon was fairly familiar with the capital of Dali. He had been to Lilikang before, and when it was time to eat he took them to a nearby restaurant for a meal. Hearing Yuan Xian said that Uncle Lu was already the owner of the house, Qin Pingon hurriedly congratulated him. He didn't plan to drink alcohol at first, so he ordered a few pots of wine from the restaurant, and the dining table became a wine table. The Lu family in Luomahi has a total of 16 houses, and the house is full of talents. Moreover, unlike the general wealthy family, the Lu family is known in the whole continent for making a fortune and being diligent and thrifty. However, Lu Su was not willing to take over the family business, and was more willing to concentrate on practicing swordsmanship. When he was in the nascent soul realm, he went to the Sword Chi Great Wall, saying that it was to break the bottleneck and enter the upper 5 realms. But the elders in Liu's ancestral hall who do not frown, not only are they afraid that Lu Su will not be able to get along there, but also that even if Lu Su is in the realm of Jade, one day North Luzhou will need to have an event. Island Sacrificial Sword. So after Lu Su returned to his hometown, grandfather saw the first sentence of this grandson, and it would be better if he was not the head of the house. I never thought about a certain family ancestral hall discussion, just using a cross-continental ferry, in exchange for a talented head of the family. Lu Su likes to drink, but he has always been slow, and when he rarely drinks happily he never gets bored. This is true in my hometown, and it is also true in the Great Wall of Sword Chi. I am a rich man, why pretend to be outside? Beiju Luzhou has the largest number of sword cultivators, the most addicted to alcohol, and the best amount of alcohol. What are the taboos when it comes to the wine table? And the Sword Chi Great Wall itself calls Dong Sanging and Qi Tingji by their first names. When you cultivate and follow the local customs, there is nothing you dare not say or cannot say. Mo was the second shopkeeper who had heard about Lu Zu's family background early on and knew that he was the young head of the Lu family in the Mule Horse River. In the words of those who are both drunkards and nurses, that is, a fat and strong fat pig is running around at the door of the second shopkeeper. So in the beginning, when the wine shop business was not so prosperous, I always thought of Lu Su as a rich and wealthy rich man, and asked him if he wanted to sit on the estate together. Qin Pingon got tired of entanglement, so he told Qin Pingon frankly that he went out and never had the habit of bringing money. After that, the second shopkeeper often invited him instead of inviting him to squat on the roadside drinking together. It seemed that he really regarded him as the kind of poor man who went back to inherit the family business and had spare money. Lu Su didn't lie, he didn't pay attention to everything except practicing swords. The family was worried that he was in a foreign land where he was unfamiliar, and swordsmanship always needed money from the gods, so they sent the money to Chunban's high on Dianchuan Mountain every 3 weeks and 5. But Lu Su never went to withdraw the money and later sent it directly. When he arrived at Sun Jiyuan's mansion, Lu Su still pretended not to know, so Sun Jiyuan greeted him and said that your family had saved money in the mansion, and Lu Su also said that he didn't need it, just keep saving it. Until the end, Lu Su had left the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and in Chunfan Zhai and Sun Jiyuan's private residence, Lu Su did not take any immortal money. The reason why the wine shop went over to support it as soon as it opened, Lu Zu's original intention was to drink the taste of hometown wine there. As for the result, it's hard to say. There are 10 people in a gambling game, 8 nurses, and one is Qin Pingon who is in the village. Only one of them is still complaining about his bad luck, and he will definitely make a lot of money next time. Now that the wine table is open for drinking, Fan Yu filled a large bowl of wine and offered toast to Master Qin Shanzhu, and she drank it all in one go. It turned out that she was rescued once by Zhou Xian when she broke through the battlefield of Dadu in Aquarius Island. To be precise, Fan Yu was grabbed by Zhou Xian's shoulder and fell directly out of the murderous encirclement. Fan Yu later learned that the martial arts senior nicknamed Zheng Qingming was actually the founding disciple of Qin Shanzhu, whose real name was Pei Qian. As a teacher and a master, Qin Pingon likes to hear this from others the most now. When he was full, Lu Wuding spoke the least but drank the most. Lao Jianxia was so drunk that he staggered without anyone helping him. Yuan Xian knew that this was because Grandpa Lu had practiced swords in his life, but he had never been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Therefore there are bowls of wine on the table today, and the old man drank it, all drinking the guilt that poured into the bowl of wine from his heart. His face flushed red after drinking, not only because of his incompetent drinking power, but also in the face of this young man from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, who was also the last hidden official of a foreigner. The old man was guilty and blushed. There are so many things in the world. The power of alcohol is not hesitant, it is difficult, and this body cannot help itself. Earlier at the wine table, the old man said that he wanted to toast Qin Yingguan with a toast. After that, the old man drank by himself and became more and more silent. Lu Su raised his elbow and tapped Qin Pingon beside him lightly, motioning you to comfort Lao Lu with a few words. The second shopkeeper, you are the best at this, see if you can help him untie his knot. Back then, in that small wine shop, the second shopkeeper came here with his mouth open, and he never made drafts for bragging. A crowd of people squatting and drinking on the street liked to listen to the second shopkeeper's story without spending any money. Qin Pingon shook his head. Why put salt on Lao Jianxia's wound? Besides, if you haven't been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, you haven't been there. I don't care about the sky or the ground, and I don't care what your reasons and difficulties are. Therefore, at the previous wine table you have to tell Shanzhu Chen or simply call Qin Pingon by name. It doesn't matter. Toast, I am a junior on the mountain. I will definitely drink it, and I will definitely pay my respects to my senior. But since you Lu Wuding used the title of a hidden official, you are also a sword cultivator from Luzhou in Beiju. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with you. Lu Su said in a heartfelt voice. Do you know Mirage? Several Qi practitioners followed me to the liquor store to drink. They were obviously not from the Jianxia sect, nor did they start with Zong, but they died on the side of the Sword Qi Great Wall. Lu Dingwu was once the direct disciple of Mirage, and he almost became the head of the sect, but because he fought for others he had a sword fight with Hai Shi, injured many sword cultivators over there, and was expelled from his division. Otherwise, when he became Jindan back then, if there was no accident he would soon cross the Hanging Mountain and go to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Lu Su was silent for a moment, looked at the old man in front of him with a sad back and continued. Lu Wuding feels that he has already repaid his favor with the Yuan family, and he just resigned to worship at the Sanlang Temple not long ago, and plans to go to the wild world alone. But Yuan Xian didn't know about it yet, so Lu Wuding didn't plan to tell him about it. Lu Wuding still doesn't know about it. It was his master who did it on purpose and asked Haisher to cooperate in a play. A good seedling can stay in Beiju Luzhou, practice swords well, and one day practice the upper 5 realms. As to whether it is a Mirage School genealogical cultivator, it does not matter. Because Lu Wuding's master is very clear with this disciple's temperament. Jindanjian Jianxiu, who is also the next head of a Mirage, is destined to not have to return home alive when he arrives at the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Qin Pingon hesitated for a moment, rubbed his face with his hands, nodded, walked to the old man's side and said in his heart, Senior Lu, there are 2 Qi practitioners from Beiju Luzhou, and the other is the sea market that hangs over the sea. The sword cultivator of the sect is called Yu He, a sword cultivator of the Jindanjing realm, and the other is a direct disciple of the head of the Mirage sect, called Gao Jia, the peak master of Dengxian Peak. Strange, how can 2 sect disciples who clearly have a feud, how can they drink together? Once drinking together, I just listened to them chatting. Yu He said that what happened back then was his fault first. Sorry for that high festival he was expelled from the division. The other one started yelling, saying that if Lu Shibua hadn't seen through his identity, he would have been our head and we would have a jade pure realm sword cultivator in Beiju Luzhou. Aizhou is going to be shorter than us. You have no ability to cooperate, you only have a broken mouth, you can't drink it. Today's wine, whoever is the will pay the bill, and the second shopkeeper will bring 2 pots of good wine over. The old man listened carefully, was silent for a moment and said with a smile, It's all a matter of mood, there's actually nothing right or wrong. Senior, if it's really uncomfortable in my heart, how can I scold you? I'm very good at this. If you start with 100 sentences, there will be no repetition. Let's go, Lao Jianxian Lu, let's have a drink alone. Calling a nascent soul realm sword cultivator a sword immortal is nothing, but it is actually an even more excessive Lu Lao sword immortal. And the rest. Go and come back. Then make a deal with the hidden officer. Strive so. Try to drink what you have left over from this year in the coming year. Lu's trip to the south was to find Qin Pingon for a drink. That's all, there was nothing to talk about. Isn't drinking with friends the right thing to do? So after drinking, Lu Su was going to make a trip to Old Longqing alone. There was some business on the mountain and he wanted to talk to the Fu family. As for Luopao Mountain, whether to go to see the situation or not. Yuan Xian's 3, it's a worthwhile trip, of course you can go back to your home. You need to go to the Xianjiao recommended by Qin Pingon, send a message from Feijian and send it back to the family to announce the good news. Lu Wuding escorted Yuan Xian back to Sanlang Temple, and he would rush to the wild world, and then he would go to the Jianqi Great Wall ruins. Lu Su followed them to the inn and stayed at the inn. Yuan Xian smiled and said, Uncle Lu, Master Qin Shan really made you a friend. Lu Su smiled and asked, How? Yuan Xian said, I heard that the inn is famous for killing pigs and slaughtering guests, and it has a very general reputation on the mountain. Lu Su said, It's hard to say if you don't treat me as a friend. I guess that inn Qin Pingon has a dividend. Fan Yu said, Not really. Lu Su said, I don't think so, that's because you are not familiar with Qin Pingon. Fan Yu became more and more strange. So, how could you 2 become such good friends? It's not like one of them likes to be in business and one who thinks more money likes to be taken advantage of. Lu Su said indifferently, High generation of sword cultivators, what is money? A Xianxia ferry was on its way back to the north. Suddenly there were monks who claimed to be worshipped by the Dali punishment department. They found a few of them and asked Bai Deng to go to the Dali capital immediately, saying that the Beijing rites asked Bai Deng to discuss the iron talisman. Jiang Shuaishan fills the gap. Bai Deng previously went out with the ghost Yinlu and Jing Ha's direct disciple Gao Geng, and never thought that when he came back he would be the Tiefu River water god. Gao Geng and Yinlu both congratulated Bai Deng, and the Dili rite said it was a discussion, but in fact there is something to discuss, isn't it obvious? I went out of Luopa Mountain before, the sky is high and the earth is wide, how do you feel? Carefree. A few of them at least have a great freedom of, I don't want to drink today, I can stop drinking. Yupujing Jianxiu Bai Deng's avenue root foot, belongs to Jiaolong, was born in the old emperor's family on the mountain in the past, and is one of the land dragon palaces in the ancient Shu. Although the large and small dragon palaces on the sea and land back then were as numerous as the hair of a cow, there were a lot of dragon children and dragon grandsons, and their descendants were very complicated, but not everyone could call them true dragons. On the mountain before, a few of them were inexplicably ordered once to go to a small vassal country south of Dadu. It was a trivial matter. Gao Geng was very familiar with the customs and officialdom of the world. There are also many crooked ideas and bad ideas. It is more than enough to be a dog-headed military strategist. Coupled with Bai Deng's sword cultivator status and jade pure realm, one errand can be said to be flawless and beautiful. Originally, fellow Daoist Bai Deng was about to become a high-ranking deity in one continent, so he should have a drink to congratulate him. There were several kinds of immortal brews on the ferry, but the three of them had a tacit understanding not to mention this. Gathering in Bai Deng's house, Gao Geng said in a heartfelt voice, "Brother Bai is the only thing that is not good for this Iron Talisman River god, that is, he is deeply involved with the country of the Song dynasty." Inlu smiled and said, "This kind of great bargain which is once in a lifetime will be caught first. As for the luck of the Song family, we will talk about it later." Gao Geng said, "Unless." Inlu also laughed and said the word "unless," and the two sides smiled at each other. Unless that Qin Shanju win the greatly national teacher. Of course, Bai Deng needs to follow a sacred way, if he wants to successfully get the seal of the Dali court and become an orthodox mountain and water deity in one place. It's just like what Zhao Duanjin, Minister of Rites, asked when discussing matters in the imperial study before, whether there will be any accident for Bai Deng to become the water god. Instead of asking what is the probability of success, you will know that Baiden's road to becoming a god is very smooth as long as there are no major accidents. This is the innate advantage of the gods who belong to Jiaolong. Reborn, shape the golden body, build temples, enjoy the incense of the world, and finally become of the mountains and rivers. The human race is the most difficult to train. For Bai Deng, who saw the sun again because he was drinking at the same table with someone, he had no idea at all and went to Baidi City in the Middle Earth Divine Continent to jump into the Dragon Gate. The next best thing is to become the righteous of Jiangshui in the court of Dali. The first choice is the land of Dali Jingji and the second choice is the land of Beiyue. The heavier the dragon the better, and the rest are not considered. As a result, Bai Deng's wish came true and his dream came true. Pushun Fu Dekong, after returning to the dojo from the capital of Dali, met a wandering Taoist priest who called himself Introspection. The young Taoist priest, who only said his name but did not report his name, entered the towering mountain temple, which is the mountain of the Prince of Zhongyue. The name of the mountain god said that Xiaodao encountered some difficulties and asked the mountain to meet and talk about it. That sneaky Taoist priest, who didn't dare to report his real name, said that he came from a small sect that pushed up from the Xiaodao generation, and there was only one master. But he admired Pushun very much, and his admiration couldn't be more. "I want to have a discussion with Fu Shanshan so that I can please return a Taoist book and enshrine it well." Fu Dekong has just walked to the capital of Dali and he is in a good mood. With humorous words he walked out of the golden body, and at the same time isolated a quiet world, lest the pilgrims in the temple make a fuss. That Taoist priest, after all, was something from the old collection of his own study, and it was indeed stained with some essence of incense. Unexpectedly, the Taoist priest didn't appreciate it, let alone know the goods. Just reading the title of the book, he began to complain that it was not a fairy book on the mountain, and it was not worth a lot of money. He found a Taoist book in the middle saying that you, the mountain master, is so big as an official, but you are stingy and you teach people to be disappointed. No matter how poor the small Taoist is, you know that you will come to the door with a generous gift. Cursing, young Taoist priests will take that. He threw the book to Fu Dekong and left Pushun angrily, but with a bang his head slammed into the incense-scented landscape restriction. Fu Dekong had to apologize to the Taoist priest with a smile and open the restriction. As for the Book of Taoism, which was a ritual exchange, Fu Dekong did not take over, but just let it hover in the air. After the Taoist priest came down the mountain, Fu Dekong waved his sleeves and moved the book to the warehouse dedicated to miscellaneous books. Unexpectedly, after a while, the immediate supervisor, Physician Jinqing, appeared in the Pushun hall with a livid face, and asked Fu Dekong if he had taken the wrong medicine and wanted to rebel. Fu Dekong was confused and had no idea why Jin Shanjun asked his teacher so much. Jin Qing saw Fu Shanshan's stunned appearance, stomped his feet lightly, stepped on the blue bricks of the main hall, and tied the line with the mountain roots of Pushun. After a while he became more and more with a dignified expression. He asked, Do you know that just now, the air fortune of the entire Jizi mountain and the water transport of the Yongjiang River seem to have been led away by your Pushan? Fu Dekong became more and more at a loss, shook his head and said, subordinates really don't know. Jin Qing asked, you didn't notice anything weird? Fu Dekong thought for a moment. Just now there was a Taoist priest from a foreign country who claimed to be called Introspection. He came here and asked me for a Taoist book to take back and enshrined. He thought the book I gave was not valuable and instead gave me a Taoist book. There is no book title on the cover, only the inscription. I think about it. I regarded it as the kind of Taoist priest who made a name for himself. I wanted to come to my Pushan side, but out of love I helped him write a few comments on the Taoist book. It's good to be famous on the mountain. Jin Qing said solemnly, where is the book? Fu Dekong said, I just threw it into the warehouse. Jin Qing asked, Fu Deshanshan, or I beg you quickly bring that Taoist book over and let me have a look? Fu Dekong was a little embarrassed and moved the Taoist book back to the main hall again. Jin Qing didn't even dare to open the book casually, he still hung it in the air and looked intently. The cover of this Taoist book of ordinary material had only self-examination. 2 characters, but the character G on the top seems to be written in gold ink, which is like a golden silk thread, and the character save at the bottom seems to be written in green ink. Jin Qing held her breath, put her fingers together and stroked the words on the cover lightly, like a vulgar man suddenly touching hot coals. Jin Qing quickly retracted his fingers and shook his sleeves vigorously. The Zhongyue Shanjun sneered, sure enough this book is a joke. It's just that the entire Pushan realm and even the Beiyue realm has lost the figure of the Taoist priest. Jin Qing squinted again at the dull-faced Fu Deshanshan, and then put his gaze on the title of the book again and said, Fu Dekong, try to open the book. Fu Dekong nodded and carefully stretched out his hand to open the book, but the Taoist book remained motionless. Even if Fu Dekong sat on a mountain and used his natal supernatural powers, he still couldn't open the book. Jin Qing suddenly smiled and said, what a Jiling wooden chicken, the other party deliberately teased him like this. It is you who admires him the most. The silk thread G is G and the condensed water transport rights province. It is Jiling. You Fu Dekong don't know where the Jiling wooden chicken first came from. Who knows? Then Fu Dashanshan, tell it yourself, who gave you this Taoist book? Fu Dekong suddenly realized. Have you really seen Headmaster Lu? No wonder the other party didn't pay incense before. Headmaster Lu really wanted to pay 3 incense sticks to the golden statue in the main hall. Fu Dekong was afraid that the golden body would be bowed down to the other party. Why did Fu Dekong deliberately address Zhangjiao Lu by his first name when he was with Qin Guosher in the capital of Dali? Jin Qing said angrily, hurry up, I don't have time to watch your jokes. Fu Dekong said in a low voice, I beg Shanjun to clear up your confusion. Jin Qing said with a smile, hurry up and say a good word to this Taoist book. The other party must still be listening. Fu Dekong hurriedly took 3 steps back and bowed to the Taoist book. Pushan Fu Dekong welcomed the Taoist book to return to the mountain. Sure enough, this Taoist book fell into Fu Dichong's sleeve on its own. Jin Qing smiled and said, teach people to be envious, look greedy. Fu Dekong smiled awkwardly. The Jin Qing shrinking mountains and returning to the temple of the Zishan mountain. Sure enough, the vision of heaven and earth in the Zhongyue Dije has dissipated. Fu Dekong sighed with emotion, and the friendship between Headmaster Lu and Mr. Chen was really not very good. The mountain raised his sleeves vigorously. The Taoist book presented by Master Lu was really heavy. In the entire mountain hall, only the mountain Fu Dekong himself did not know. Behind the statue there was actually a Taoist priest who had left and returned. He slowly moved forward with the crowded people. The young Taoist priest clenched his fists in front of him, while he swayed while walking, chanting words in his mouth, hoping that the mountain would bless the trail with everything going smoothly and safely. After Lu Chen quietly left Pushan, he went to the side of the boundary stone monument in Jingyang Mountain, and before going to Qingming Xianxia he also went to the heart of a certain female cultivator in Luzhou Beiju and sleepwalked. Lu Chen took the nightmare that was still in the realm of cultivation and put it in his sleeve. Only then did he fly up to the sky and really return to Baiyujing. In Nanhua City, Lu Chen sat in the dojo, raised his arms, straightened the crown above his head with both hands and took a deep breath. Lu Chen didn't even dare to separate out a piece of mind or the kind of yin and spirit out of his body, but instead started a real journey against the current. In the middle of Tongye Continent, Yulindu outside the capital of Yunyan country, On both sides of the ferry, there are high-rise buildings and wealthy private residences on one side, and on the other side are small restaurants that are not very good and cheap. As the night fell, the number of guests on the river bank gradually decreased, the restaurants closed one after another, and the opposite side became more and more brightly lit and full of traffic. A sword immortal in white and an old man in yellow sat opposite each other, ordered some special snacks and ordered barley wine. The latter asked with a smile, "Are the rich people in the world all night owls?" Miyu, who rarely left the ferry, said with a smile, "I'm not from this side and I don't have a lot of money in my pocket, otherwise I would invite fellow Daoist Nin to drink flower wine on the other side." Nin Daoist smiled and said, "What's the point of drinking flower wine? It's all about drinking money. I admire those poor scholars who went to Beijing to take the exam. That's just lying." Miyu smiled. "Strange to say, I used to think about women when I was in my hometown, but when I got here I didn't seem to have any ideas. Is it really old? Or is it really like what Chef Xu said? A book with simple language, smooth story, and occasionally a few punchlines, just like thunder on the ground. If there are too many pages and pages they are all like flowers, but if you just pile them up blindly, it will be far inferior to the taste of a dish of pickles and porridge. Look at women." Miyu and Nin Daoist drank this wine until dawn. Of course, the owner of the restaurant was looking at money for the sake of money. After getting a few snow money he went back to sleep. Anyway, even if the two guests were torn down the shop, it was not worth a cent of ferry money. During this period Daoist Nin also went to the kitchen to be the cook for a time, and cooked a few dishes for Xianxia. In the early morning of this day, Li Huai brought the fox charmer named Wei Taijin with a power fence on his head to the mountain gate of Luopao Mountain. Because Li Huai wants to go to the wild world, he has already taken leave from Xianxia Academy, and the mountain chief has approved it. Mainly I was thinking about the old blind man who didn't even know his surname or first name. Now he is still on the Shirwanda mountain. He is alone. It's quite uncomfortable. I want to go there to see the old man. So Li Huai was called by Qin Pingon to Luopao Mountain this time, just to say something in person. No matter who he is with or what his relationship is, as long as he is a close person, Li Huai will try to say goodbye to him when he separates from him. There is nothing up and down the mountain, the distance is far and the distance is long, and the length of time is a difference after all. Now the gatekeeper of Luopao Mountain is a young and unfamiliar Taoist priest. Suddenly, a white-haired boy appeared, claiming to be the editor of Luopao Mountain, Lord Yingwen's confidant on the side of the Sword Qi Great Wall, and the #1 general under the command of Lord Qin Shan. Wei Taijin beside Li Huai, she didn't dare to look up at the mountain gate archway. The genus of monsters and monsters, regardless of whether they belong to the wild world or not, it is inevitable that they will feel apprehensive when they hear the title of hidden official. What's more, Wei Taijin was standing at the foot of the Luopao Mountain. Her father, the old fox who used to pretend to be a landman in Baojing Mountain, saw Wei Taijin last time. By collecting the Xianxia newspapers and some clues from that year, the old fox followed the vine and found out that the man who almost became his son-in-law back then. The guy, it turns out to be Qin Shanju of the Luobao Mountain in Beipingzu. Today the old fox is so angry he beat his chest and his feet, and he was so angry that he was so angry, that surnamed Yang mistaken me. Motherfucker, wait for my realm to rise in the future. When the mountain master, I have to slap him to death. What a marriage, just because this guy is in the middle just slipped away under the nose, and I blame you. I didn't listen to my father's advice back then. It counted, forget it. Master Qin Shanju, Qin Jiangxian, such a big man, a small family like us can't afford to climb high, and you are indeed not worthy of it. Oh no, marriage between men and women is not necessarily so many talents and beauties, men and women, which one is the right match? Thinking of this, Wei Taijin had a headache, so she glanced at the scholar beside her through the tool. As soon as I heard that the fox charm was in the nascent soul realm, when the white-haired boy took a pen to record, he was obviously lacking in interest, but at any rate he was in the middle 5 realm, which was slightly better than the upper 5 realm. When I asked Li Huai's realm again after hearing that he was neither a qi trainer nor a martial artist, the white-haired boy suddenly burst into laughter, as if he was lucky to go out a few steps. Of course the white-haired boy recognized Li Huai. Wei Taijin took courage and said timidly, "Master Kong Ho, my son is a sage of the academy." The white-haired boy put away the pen and paper, put his hands on his hips and said with a grin, "I'm a good boy in the middle of the winter, sage, amazing, young and promising." Li Huai could not wait to dig a hole on the spot and drill down. Li Huai quickly changed the subject. "Is Pei Qian back?" The white-haired boy led Li Huai to sit at the table. No, that little black charcoal surnamed Pei is still busy in Tong Yezhou. Of course, today's Pei Qian is no longer a small black charcoal. The white-haired boy is more depressed about this. It's not good for everyone to be short melons together. Li Huai asked, "Where's Uncle Zheng?" The white-haired boy sat cross-legged, nibbling on the melon seeds. "I have nothing to do all day long, so I went to chat with the old cook again. It's euphemistically called learning from each other. It's bulging here and there and I can't hear it." With the boy in Tsing-yi, he watched so many scenes in vain every day and he was reluctant to lose a few Immortals' money. It's just that the family's ugliness cannot be made public, and the white-haired boy has no face to talk about it. Li Huai was born and raised in the small town and it was actually okay to hear these contents. But he was so ashamed of the fox beside him. Jiang Shangzhen did not go back to Luopao Mountain with him, but went to Changchun Palace first, and then asked Wei Shanjun to help him and dragged him back to Nujiashan Ferry. Only after returning to Luopa Mountain before reaching the old cook's house, he found a slender woman in a snow-white robe standing on the road. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and clasped his fists. "Longevity is the law." Changming nodded and smiled. "I have seen Chief Shou." Jiang Shangzhen asked, "This is the law of longevity?" Changming said, "I happened to pass by." Jiang Shangzhen nodded. "I don't want to talk to her more. In the lonely mountains of her own family, I am afraid that apart from the mountain owner, everyone is more or less afraid of her." She suddenly smiled and said, "Chief Shou, I heard two sentences you describe me. One is on our Luobao Mountain, I am the most favorite long-lived Taoist friend in Zhou, and the second sentence is Palm Sister Lu squinted and smiled and the man's heart trembled. I never thought that in Chief Shou's heart. I was so flattered that I could have such a beautiful appearance and such a high evaluation." Jiang Shangzhen's scalp was numb and he knew something was wrong, so he immediately clarified, "Fellow Daoist longevity, it's just two jokes on the wine table, you can't take it seriously. Brother Jia has a strict mouth and will not let this kind of thing go out. It must be the Uncle Chen Lingjun who owes his mouth. The route of the flow of wealth in the world is the road of wealth. Seems to be illusory, but it is not. In the eyes of the monks on the mountain, this road really exists. Otherwise, why did Shanzhu Chen let one of his own patriarchs sit on the Fengyuan ferry? If it annoys Sister Changming, she only needs to walk to the blessed land of the Cloud Cave. Even if there is Ni Yuan's Hang's three-legged golden toad, with all her strength to help gather fortune, she probably won't be able to stand it. Although Changmin's appearance is not the kind of beauty that is alluring, but to be honest, the kind of femininity on Changmin's sister is really rare, very rare. Jiang Shangzhen has his own set of evaluation methods for beauties in the world, adding and subtracting points for 7 or 8 categories, which is extremely rigorous. For 100 pennies, if you only talk about the beauty of a long-lived Daoist, you can probably have 80 pennies, but if you add her unique charms, it will be at least the level of 95 pennies. However, Jiang Shangzhen knew very well that a woman like the long-lived Daoist friend was destined not to have feelings for anyone. Luo Hua is intentional and ruthless, and the wishful thinking of all men in the world is today's green hills and sunset, which cannot be chased or kept. At this point, Jiang Shangzhen had no choice but to use a trick to keep his dog's head. In his own Luoluo Mountain, Jiang Shangzhen actually used the means of isolating heaven and earth. Do you know if the mountain master knows one thing? Changmin nodded. I know that the young master has long known, but I have to pretend that I don't know in some way. The question and answer on both sides is very convoluted. This involves a very important and can even be said to be the top 2 top-level secret affairs. View the world. Think of the lotus flower blessed land as a world with complete and orderly circulation of the avenues. For example, where did the first sword cultivator in the world come from, and why did he come to be? The mountain master may not be able to grasp a clear context, but as long as it is done for Qin Pingon, the Dao will be of great benefit. This is similar to that in Xuandu Guan, when Sun Daochang asked Fatty Yen to think about the question, why is there only sword repair in the world? But this matter outsiders cannot remind Qin Pingon. Don't say it is beating around the bush and you can't even say a word. Otherwise, it would be like someone forcibly handing Qin Pingon a bamboo basket and asking him to go to the river to salvage the moon, which is destined to be a waste of time. Therefore Cui Dongshan could only be in a hurry, and he did not dare to give any hints to Mr. Yu so as not to superfluous. Jiang Shangzhen breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, in that case this is the best. In the world of Qingming, Xuanduguan received a letter from Bai Yujing from Feijian. The sender was Lu Qin, who had just returned to Qingming world, and the recipient was Bai Yi, who was practicing swordsmanship in Xuandu. Bai also read the secret letter and then went to inform Zhou Xian, who is now a guest in the Taoist temple, and said that we will go back to Haoran world together. Your little junior brother, please go to Luopao mountain. And Lu Qin said in the letter that this time the two of them traveled far away and flew into the sky, and Bai Yujing would not care about it, so there was no need to report. Lu Shilu smiled and asked, Junior brother just told me to go, what are you doing? Bai Yujing has chased people away. Do you think it would be more troublesome for you to stay here? Bai Yi said, according to Lu Chen's explanation, it is in exchange with Haoran Xianxia I will return to my hometown, and another Jianxiu named Xiaomo will come over here, and let the other party be a guest of Mingyue Haotsai so that I can talk to that spectator. Shu reminisces about the old days. When I return to the Qingming world, that sword cultivator will return to the Haoran world. Bai Yi's sword practice is actually very simple, especially after he entered the Jade Purity realm. In fact, it didn't take long before he became an immortal. There have been countless poems handed down from generation to generation, among which there is a sentence, the immortal touches my top and the hair grows. One day before, Bai Yi, who was watching the blue lotus flower in the half pond, realized something. He just retreated for a while, and with a stick of incense there was a vision of heaven and earth. Growth and not hair, the top floating fairy. After walking out of the room that was still closed, Bai was already a sword immortal. However, Qi practitioners who have entered the fairyland can change their real appearance, but Bai Yi didn't do this and still has the appearance of a teenager. Lu Shirley glanced at the juvenile tiger hat and asked with a smile, how do you say it? Bai also rubbed the hat on his head, it seems like I'm used to wearing it. Lu Shirlu said, it was agreed in advance that if you see my husband this time, you are not allowed to show my husband's face in front of me. Inappropriate. I have to give it to White Emperor City in Middle-earth. Two Xing Juzhong, who are both monks in the 14th realm, stood side by side in a realm that seemed to be too empty. He once painted a vast and boundless astrological map. In addition, he also imitated a Guangqianjian Zhai in the middle. In the vast world, the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and the wild world, the flying swords of the swordsmen of all dynasties are densely packed and confused. One looks at the celestial phenomenon and the other looks at the sword map. Master Qin Qinglu alone did not teach swordsmanship to his pioneering disciple. As for the rest of the so-called direct disciples, they lacked aptitude. Like the younger disciple Lu Daochun, it would be meaningless for Qin Qinglu to teach him. Xing Juzhong did not have any grudges about this. If the preacher does not preach this way, is it possible that the disciple will not be able to teach himself? In the world of Qingming, a small Taoist temple located in a remote place. Because there are relatives, one old and one young, depend on each other in this Taoist temple. In the early years they relied on money to open the way and finally got the identity of a resident Taoist priest, but there was no genealogy. Regarding the courtyard as well as the morning bell and the evening drum, the old man did it for the young man. The old man, who is called Chongbo by the young man, nags a lot, and the young man surnamed Chen is just a deaf ear. In the dark, reading at night, the light was dim, an old man named Chong Gung was explaining in detail to the young man named Chin Tsong what is meant by a gentleman who respects his own, and does not admire his presence in the sky, is the sun. And also, after hearing Uncle Chang's explanation, the young man couldn't help but ask, Uncle Chong, is this the knowledge of Confucianism? You teach me this without being taboo? The old man nodded, picked up a peanut from the plate, put it into his mouth and chewed it carefully. The lamp on the table was slowly burning. As for whether or not to commit taboos, only you and I know, and no one knows when you go out. What does it matter? Chin Tsong said with a smile, just a scholar? Not much in fame. Chongbo squinted and smiled. Who said no? Chin Tsong asked curiously, Uncle Chong, there are no outsiders, let me know. Do you know him? Are they all those poor scholars? Chongbo did not answer this question, but just asked the young man to repeat the meaning of that sentence. Chongbo once said a chariot and reel, and it's a matter of time and history, and it will be spent in the sound of books, then. The young man was full of smiles and began to shake his head. What is meant by a gentleman who respects those who belong to himself, but does not admire those who belong to the heavens? He is progressing by the day. And listen to me carefully. The old man pretended to be angry and glared. I didn't stand during the day and I didn't sit at night. How many times have I said it? I'm sitting upright. The young man is not afraid of this Uncle Chang. In the eyes of the old man, every time he looks at himself, it is the kind of doting and gratification that his parents treat the younger generation, or the kind of younger generation who is very promising. Probably this is a day with nothing to do, relatives sitting idle, and the lights are lovely. Sort of coming. Chapter 1181. Chapter 1181. It turned out to be the protector Chao Gingxin came to a house in a secluded alley in the capital, took out a key, opened the courtyard door and entered the courtyard 2 times. Just faster. This is the first time that Chao Gingxin has stepped into the courtyard. He has been denied entry a few times before, because someone instructed the then Du Zhao Chao in a secret letter that he will come here in the future when someone succeeds as the national teacher of Dali. While opening the courtyard, a meeting was held, but what was being discussed and who was called was not explained in the letter. The other party just gave Chao Gingxin a title that did not receive royal salaries and was not included in the official records of the court. The small water well. Chao Gingxin squatted at the wellhead and looked inside for a while. It was dark, it didn't look like there was a corpse, and it didn't look like the entrance to a certain land dragon palace. Then he threw a stone in and made a thud. Fortunately he could draw water and fetch water. Chao Gingxin went to the utility room to get a broom and dustpan, and began to clean the courtyard. After Chao Gingxin was busy with all this, he sat at the wellhead, took off the small purple gourd jug with a bright pulp on his waist, pulled off the wine stopper and raised his head to drink a sip of the Changchun wine bestowed by the palace. There is a pair of spring festival couplets pasted at the entrance of the main house, but as the years go by, the wind, rain and the scorching sun have exposed them year after year. First half. There is no in the next pen and people follow what they say. Heaven will die in gentleness and the manifesto of the Tao is in me, and it is beneficial to open the book and gentleness is here. Chao Gingxin drank about 3 or 2 wines, but did not think about how to complete the content of the couplet, so he gave up angrily. According to the cumbersome method on the letter, pouring spiritual energy into the jade tablet is like writing the word, earthly branch, in different stroke sequences. After a while, 2 groups of people came to the small courtyard one after another. Chao Gung looked calm. This was what he had thought about before he was about to call someone. He had to pretend to be a little immortal on the mountain. When he found that Zhou Haichao was among them, he looked a little unnatural just because his uncle Chao Ping had called Chao Gingxin to the study before going to the Sunfall Ferry in the wild world. One of the things was that let the eldest Chao Gingxin marry his biological son. If he waits for Chao Ping to return to Dali, he still does not give a word. I believe that Chao Ping will definitely pull out the jade belt around his waist and let Chao Shilang eat a full meal similar to fried pork with bamboo whips. At that time Chao Gingxin took this great female master as a shield, and never thought that Chao Ping would take it seriously. There are no officials in the hospital. So when Chao Gingxin saw the Prince Song Su, he didn't get up to say hello. Yuan Huajing asked, Chao Gingxin, how do you own this jade card? Because according to the rules of the Earth Branch, seeing this jade card is like seeing Cui Yu. Yu Yu smiled and said, it's just been passed and it will be handed over to Mr. Chen soon. Is this a return to the original owner? Chao Gingxin smiled and said, that's not necessarily true. But a servant of the Ministry of Personnel can take care of the 12 of you. You seem to have lost a bit. There are a lot of talents and the mysterious masters in the yard are immortal. A descendant of the Yuan clan of Shangzhou Kingdom, Yuan Huajing Yuningjing sword cultivator. Song Su, the Prince of Dali, was a swordsman in the Jindanjing realm. Han Zhoujin, a female formation master from Shengao Sect's Qingtan Blessed Land. Yu Yu, a military cultivator from the Yu clan of Shangzhou Kingdom. Capital Road Records, Zhurong Rinshi, Guling Translation Bureau Novice, After the Awakening. Sui Lin, a Qi trainer from the Yinyang family. Confucian scholar Lu Hui. Ghost Repair Change Yen. A young man from a strange origin, Go Xian. Hard work. Zhou Haijing, the only pure warrior, a seaside fisherman and a mountain master. Chao Gingxin only knew more than half of the 12 earthly branches of Dali. After a while, a blue shirt appeared in the alley with his fingers bent. He knocked gently on the courtyard door, and then led Xiao Mo, crossed the threshold into the courtyard, and Xiao Mo gently closed the courtyard door. Chao Gingxin got up and said with a smile, Mr. Qin, I didn't expect us to meet again so soon. Qin Pingon shook his sleeves, the smell of alcohol drifted away in the wind and said with a smile, I didn't show courtesy to Shilang Chao, I just took Lu Su and the others to the Changpu River restaurant, and I never thought of reporting the name of Shilang Chao there. Not only do not give a discount but also double the amount of drinking. They won't let us go. I said it's okay to not keep accounts. A booze debt is one. Even Yuan Huajing couldn't help but glance at Chao Gingxin. Lu Hui and Kushu had suffered a lot on Mr. Chen's side, and they almost didn't give Chao Shilang a thumbs up. This daring Chao Shilang really wants to die. You said that it's not good for you to cheat and dare to cheat this Mr. Chen? As far as Lu Hui is concerned, Qin Pingan's flower blossom, which resembles both boxing and swordsmanship, was instantly pierced by dozens of long swords. There is also a female ghost who changed her appearance. At that time I didn't see how that Qin Pingan pity Xianxia, and chopped it up on the spot with a sword move, Pianyue said to be self-created. Only Zhou Haichao, who entered the industry late, didn't know the seriousness of the benefits for the time being, and she didn't know the consequences of provoking Qin Pingan. So she noticed that the atmosphere in the hospital was not right, so she was more curious. The geniuses among these geniuses are not very arrogant on my side. Why is seeing Qin Pingan like a mouse seeing a cat today? As for Chao Gingxin said with embarrassment, is retribution coming so quickly? Qin Pingan explained to them. Xiao Mo said that you suddenly gathered in one place and I was a little curious. Since it was Shilang Chao who called you here, I have nothing to do with me. Chao Gingxin hurriedly said, it's related. Mr. Chen doesn't want to stay out of it. Cui Guosher has something to say. Let me speak publicly in front of both of you. Zhou Xian is a lively person, so he went to the house and moved a bench over, wanting to give Mr. Chen a place to sit. As a result, he was snatched by Gai Yen and placed beside Qin Pingan. Just relying on Mr. Chen's good words in the military yamen, he changed the innkeeper to Yen, not to mention moving a bench. As long as Mr. Chen is willing, she can sit on her. When she was putting down the bench, she saw the young man in the yellow hat and blue shoes greet her with a smile, and she smiled back. Gai Yen only knew that he was Mr. Chen's personal squire, who once entered the palace together to meet the Queen Mother. Qin Pingan and Gai Yen thanked him, sat on the bench and said with a smile, tell me about it, I'll listen. Chao Gingxin said, just 2 sentences. 1 sentence is for Yuan Jianxian and the others. Those who have waste cards in the courtyard today will be under my jurisdiction in the future, not under the deployment of the new national teacher of Dali, but the new national teacher can make suggestions, that's all. The second sentence was addressed to Mr. Chen. Actually, Cui Guoshi's letter didn't mention his name. I'll repeat it again. I'll say what I wrote in the letter. You're not black enough and you're not ruthless enough. This group of people can't be used well at all. Just like a sword in the sheath, it will only wear away the sword's will for a long time, and they will only lose their vitality, and they will be reduced to tasteless and unfortunate useless ribs. Qin Pingan nodded, wrapped his arms around his sleeves and smiled, and then asked, Brother Cui thinks I can't do it, but you can do it? Chao Gung's heart choked for a while. This question is not easy to answer. Yu Ye's eyes were shining brightly and she said in her heart, come here, bet. I bet that Mr. Chen will cut Chao Gingxin, at least hand out a sword or reward a punch. Gai Yen immediately echoed, this time, let's stop gambling and bet that the Changchun Palace wine is ready. Qin Pingan stretched out his hand, bring that letter over and have a look. Before going to Changpu River for a drink, of course I trusted Chao Duzhou, who was an official in my hometown and was well known. It's hard to say now. Chao Gingxin said helplessly, at the end of the letter Cui Guosher specifically reminded me that it will be destroyed after reading it. It really doesn't give Mr. Chen any evidence. Qin Pingan asked, then changed to a simpler way of proof. How can you prove that your heart is more ruthless? Chao Gingxin glanced at the 12 earthly branches, then looked at the man in the blue shirt and long coat sitting on the bench, took off the wine gourd, mentioned it and said with a smile, before speaking the truth, Mr. Chen, allow me to drink some wine to strengthen my courage? Qin Pingan picked up his cyan long coat, changed to a sitting position with his legs crossed, stretched out his palm and said with a smile, you can do whatever you want. Chao Gingxin took a sip of wine, lowered his head, raised the back of his hand and wiped the corners of his mouth, raised his head, squinted his eyes and smiled. If I had entered this yard earlier, Yuan Huajing, the 12 of them would be in Treasure Ping continent now. Some capitals to the south and the entrance of the Patriarch Hall, the head of the emperor of a certain country, and the corpse of the head of a certain mountain have been doubled, and there are 24 in total. Before returning to Dali, leave a reminder to the Imperial Court and the Immortal Mansion. If you see any bad news or obituary mentioning these accidents in any Shanshuodi newspaper, Or you may speculate or frame grievances. Put the blame on a certain dynasty in the north, and in return, the dragon chair in their imperial court and the chair of the head of the mountain will always be empty, and there will be no one to sit on. When Chao Jengson's words were settled, the courtyard became silent. Chao Gingxin glanced at a pair of plywood shoes on the bench, one on the ground and the other in the air. It is easy to hunt righteousness with unrighteousness, and it is difficult to hunt unrighteousness with righteousness. After Chao Gingxin finished saying this, he took another sip of wine, making a thud and don't like the gourd. Yu opened her mouth wide, and she clenched a fist in one hand and waved it vigorously. Chao Jengson's penultimate sentence really touched her heart. Qin Pingon nodded. Aside from isolated cases, it's all the same. Chao Gingxin sighed as if he never expected such an answer. It makes sense, but it doesn't make sense at all. Qin Pingon stood up and asked with a smile, Chao Gingxin, in the future you will act in the same vein. Do I have the right to know in advance and the right to veto? Chao Gung said in his heart. Cui Guosher didn't say this in the letter. Qin Pingon said, that's it. Chao Gung was speechless and had to sigh heavily. He suddenly asked, Mr. Qin really took his friends to the Changpu River? Qin Pingon smiled and said, fortunately I came here after drinking in courage. If you talk about you, I won't stay here to get in the way. Qin Pingon took the squire out of the yard and gradually walked out of the alley. Chao Gingxin, who listened to the footsteps, was sure that they were far away, so he sat down on the wellhead, pulled off his collar and fanned the wind, and started drinking and beating himself up. Zhou Xian walked over to the bench and wanted to move back to the original position, but was stopped by Gai Yan. Zhou Xian looked puzzled, and Gai Yan said confidently that she was going to move to the inn to be the treasurer of the town store. Yu sat on the steps outside the main house door and praised, Chao double, yes, very good. Yu was young and her family was not low. She had long heard of Chao Gingxin, Yuan Jingding and Lu Sunmai's legendary deeds that belonged to the previous generation in Ichi Lane and Cheer Street, where wealthy and aristocratic families gathered. The younger generation, like Xiao Duanming, all know that Chao Gingxin used to make a fortune by selling pornographic novels and pictures. When Chao Gingxin went to the local government, the old people were relieved and this scourge finally passed. Chao Gingxin said helplessly, this nickname is not very pleasant. Yu smiled and said, it sounds better than Chao Thief. It turned out that among the two generations who cared about Qixiong and Cheer Street, they were used to calling Chao Gingxin a Chao Thief. Zhou Haichao leaned against the doorpost of a wing with his arms around his chest, and asked with a smile, what Chao Shilang just said was the truth? Chao Gingxin glanced at the woman's arm, but didn't dare to look at it anymore and said with a wry smile, there are fake wines in the wine, not to mention the words spoken. Song Su said, your approach has too many sequelae. No matter how secretive we are, today's Guanhu Academy is not a fool. Chao Gingxin smiled, it's just to fool. Chen Guoshi sighed, I have to say I don't believe it myself. What do you believe? Zhou Haichao joked, Chao Gingxin, you are a servant, how can you talk to His Royal Highness? Chao Gingxin smiled and dismissed it, but the dog couldn't stop eating shit, and took the opportunity to take another look at the round scenery on her side. Last time he took Xiao Duanming to the roof to watch the arena competition, but it was too far away to see it clearly. Yuan Huajing asked, what other orders do Shilang Chao have? Chao Gingxin smiled and said, let's go back to our homes and we will meet again if we have something to do. Since there is nothing to do today, then we will go home. Gai Yan and a group of people returned to the inn, and each practiced sword or qi in a snail shell dojo. Following Mr. Chen's suggestion, Gai Yan took the initiative to chat with Zhou Haichao about the idea of doing business in partnership and making the inn business bigger together. Zhou Haichao's eyes lit up, but he didn't say whether it was okay or not. He directly talked to Gayan about how to split the bill. She opened her mouth wide and wanted to split the bill with Gayan 55. If I had heard that Zhou Haichao was so unprofessional before, Gayan would have let her get out of the way. Today, Gayan felt confident and didn't panic at all, so he talked about some of his experiences, and told Zhou Haichao what the inn would be next. How to operate a book of business. Zhou Haichao was surprised to hear that, if he changed his face to this fool, could he have been overtaken by a ghost? No, she is a ghost herself. That change Yen is, suddenly enlightened like a god. It's almost like asking boxing in the arena. Once the momentum is weak, it will be difficult to bargain. Zhou Haichao has to take a step back and she and Gayan Sanchi Kai. Then there was a young female nun who had just been removed from the door, and came to discuss the matter with the shopkeeper, and said that a few distinguished guests from other towns in Beiju Luzhou, a juvenile figure, asked if she could go directly to the inn. By the two houses near the water here, Luzhou Moon and Xianxia, as long as the inn nods and sells these two houses to them, they guarantee that they can stay at most 1 month within a year, and the remaining 11 months or longer, the inn can be opened to the outside world. As for other guests staying at the top, the receipt is correct and all the income goes to the inn. Gai Yan was stunned for a moment. Have you met such a big idiot who has so much money that he has nowhere to spend? Zhou Haijing asked. What are their identities? The young female cultivator said, Yuan Xian Fan Yu Lu Wooding in the Sanlang Temple. The mule, the horse, the river and the Liuxiu. Zhou Haijing grinned and said, Good guy, the Yuan family of the Sanlang Temple and the Luoma Heliu clan are all the wealthiest people in their Beiju Luzhou rank. They must double the original price and then double it again. However, Gai Yan said to the young female nun, Just tell the steward and sell it to them at the cost price. Zhou Haijing said angrily, Gaian, if you have money but don't make money, your brain is flooded? Gai Yan said, Lu Su has been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and Fan Yu has been to the battlefield of our Dali accompanying capital. Zhou Haijing stared straight at Gai Yan. Gai Yan said, Look at what I do, just break up with you, go back to your own house and I will only earn my little money from now on. However, Zhou Haijing smiled suddenly. It's alright, you are the shopkeeper and just the second shopkeeper, you have the final say. I used to think you were stupid so I didn't know how to make money. Gai Yan smiled and asked, What about now? Zhou Haijing said, It's really stupid. Gai Yan's eyebrows stood upright. Say it again. Zhou Haijing asked the female nun to chat with the inn steward, then winked at Gaian and said with a smile, How about that bench that was moved from the small courtyard? How about you lend me a seat? When Yun and Xianxia. Gai Yan glared and said, You mother-in-law, you are so serious. Zhou Haijing smiled and said, Who was at the door of the house when he saw Mr. Chen? He was like a tiger and a sheep, and he tried his best to get on the other side. Gai Yan blushed and said, Isn't that a joke with Mr. Chen? Zhou Haijing lowered his voice and said, I think Qin Pingon is still a young child. Gai Yan waved her sleeves and closed the door. It's not good to have a good chat. Leaving that alley, Qin Pingon took Xiaomo to stroll around the capital. Xiaomo said, Chief Zhou asked Wei Shanjun to help and has returned to Luopao Mountain. In examining the ripples of the morale machine of qi training and the flow of spiritual qi in the world, Xiaomo is actually better than Baijing. It is precisely because of this housekeeping skill that he and Baijing will only have 3 sword fights 10,000 years ago. Otherwise, not to mention being forced to lead the sword in 3 battles, 30 battles are possible. Qin Pingon asked with a smile. Is it at the Changchun Palace where dumplings were made? Chief Zhou, because of his face, had to scold him or beat him and ran away? I remember the first time I visited Luzhou in Beiju, I heard that Xianxia was notorious for many deeds there. For example, there is a mountaintop that only provokes 1 female cultivator, and a Jianghu sect only deceives 1 female hero. What a stinky bug. If Xianxia didn't use a pseudonym as the chief worshipper, Qin Pingon could not imagine the reputation of Luopao Mountain on Baoping, Tongye and Baizhulu Mountains. Xiaomo smiled. I don't know the specific inside story. He still respects Chief Zhou very much. When the sun's downfall has not yet been revealed, Chief Zhou is always spending money there, not icing on the cake but giving help in the snow. It is better to give a piece of money in difficult times than a piece of gold. What's more, at that time Chief Zhou's money was Gu Ye's money. So Xiaomo felt that unless the son made a decision, who would dare to compete with Chief Zhou in the future, Xiaomo was the first to refuse. Before Xiago returned from the fire temple, Xiaomo wondered, I don't know if Xiago and that Aunt Feng have anything to talk about. I remember that they had a normal relationship before. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Women and women talking about men, there are no taboos. Men mention women and say some dirty words. Compared with them, it is like a child playing a house. Xiaomo sincerely praised, Young master even understands this? Qin Pingon hurriedly shook his head and clarified, Of course I don't understand. I heard what the old cook told Chief Zhou and me Xianxia. They are the top experts and I will leave if I hear it occasionally. Qin Pingon turned to his heartfelt words and asked, Xiaomo, I really thought about it. I want to join the genealogy of the ancestors of Luopao Mountain and become a named worshipper of Jisifeng? Xiaomo asked with a smile. Young master shouldn't be Xiego, right? Qin Pingon said, Xiego has always been just Bai Jing, a genealogical identity of a mighty world. She can't be restrained at all. Her identity and Taoism are the same. She wants to be the second seat of worship, just like a joke. Of course, Luopao Mountain really needs an extra Ascension Realm pure sword repairer. To be precise, Howren world can keep Xiego, and the wild world can go to one less Bai Jing. I know this and Xiego also knows it. Du Ming, just because you are here I won't break it with her. Xiaomo asked suspiciously, young master can't trust me? Qin Pingon laughed angrily. Why, Mr. Imo only speaks at critical moments. Isn't it a waste of his previous achievements? Xiaomo laughed dumbly. It doesn't matter to me whether you want to join the Jinyu genealogy of the Ancestral Master Hall or not. In the end, Jisifeng will discuss matters whether there is a record or not. You are all a little street. Qin Pingon said, but for you more or less, it is a layer of restraint. There happened to be a child nearby who released paper kites, and Qin Pingon pointed to the paper kites in the sky in the distance. You are pure sword cultivators, the sky is high and the earth is wide, and you should be free and unfettered. Then every kind of nostalgia, hatred, concern, nostalgia and remembrance of ours is like a thread of paper kite, and it will be remembered with a gentle pull. When thoughts come together, the mind of the Tao ripples like water. It's easy to stop the thoughts, but it's hard to stop them. Xiaomo thought about it carefully. I was under a tree and listened to the Buddha and an anonymous man talking about the Dharma. The latter said that others were purgatory in the world, but the Buddha said that a lotus flower opened in the world because of this. Qin Pingon was speechless for a long time. I forgot who said it. Making mistakes and forgetting is a kind of beauty, a kind of tenderness with compassion, and it belongs to extrajudicial grace. Xiaomo said softly, young master. Qin Pingon smiled and said helplessly, you have moved out of the Buddha, what else can I say? Xiego appeared in front of the road and handed them a few bucket cakes wrapped in oil paper. Delicious. Qin Pingon took the bucket of cake and asked, are you giving me any money? Xiego snorted and patted his mink hat. Forget it. She also thought that in the boundary of our Dali capital, if you drink and eat and report the name of the mountain master or the national teacher, you don't need to pay. Misunderstood, huh? She used to be in Beiju Luzhou before. She was not like this. She went to the mountains to collect herbs and set up a street stall in the mountain market. Xiego immediately turned around and ran away. On the side of the bucket cake stand, which has a very good business, the man scolded and looked at an honest little girl. How could she be a liar? The sable-cap girl touched a small piece of silver from her sleeve and the man took it. He immediately smiled and hurriedly said that the guest official is welcome to come again. Back at Qin Pingon and the others, Xiego nibbled at the only piece of dried plum, vegetable and meat bucket cake left in his hand and said vaguely, Shanju, Aunt Feng asked you to go to Baihua Blessed Land earlier, and if you don't go she won't need your help. It's time to take it back. Qin Pingon heard what Aunt Feng meant and said, I see, I must go early. Anyway, as long as it's not her heartfelt words, Aunt Feng can definitely hear it. Xiego said, and Aunt Feng asked me to report the good news to the mountain owner. There is no objection to the discussion about the mountain owner becoming a Confucian gentleman at the Confucian temple. Qin Pingon was a little strange. No matter how bold Aunt Feng was, she couldn't eavesdrop on the discussions of the Zhongtu Confucian temple. Having said that, Xiego stretched out his hand. Qin Pingon took out a piece of silver that he carried with him and placed it on the palm of the sable-cap girl. Xiaomo looked bewildered. Xiego grinned and said, a lot of the novels of talented and beautiful women have already been written. The scholars who are rushing to the capital who have passed the Jinshu examination, and those who come to the door to announce the good news, are rewarded with money. Xiaomo was a little helpless. You really have the face to accept the sun really gives. Xiego got the money and smiled brightly. Aunt Feng just said that it was Mao Sai from the Book of Rites Academy, and he disliked Fijian's slow message delivery. So after the discussion was over and he walked out of the Confucian temple, Mao Sai shouted, her divine name, ask her to help report the letter. Qin Pingan's eyes lit up. Xiego laughed and helped to express the thoughts of the owner of the mountain. It's the only new way of making money in the world. Qin Pingon sighed. Nonsense, how dare you bother Aunt Feng. In fact, Xiaomo feels more and more that Xiego is in Luopao Mountain. With or without him, Xiaomo is the same. She is very much like the locals and she lives happily every day. Xiago said in a low voice. Xiaomo, Aunt Feng said, His Majesty the Emperor took a jar of Chongqun Palace wine and fished Chao Shilang to go to the Banzhong on duty, just like Luopa Mountain took you to fish me. In fact, at the Huishan Temple's grape trellis she chatted with Aunt Feng, but it was more exciting than that. It was because they inadvertently overheard Xiaomo's chat with the owner of the mountain, and Aunt Feng gave her this for nothing. Way to go. Xiaomo asked, Aren't you angry when you heard it? Xiago tilted his sable hat. Why are you angry? I think it's a good word. Chongqun Palace Fairy Brew is a good wine that everyone likes. It's so good that after drinking it the wine jar will be kept. Qin Pingon smiled and said, I'm still here, you're almost there. Xiago grinned and said, Aunt Feng also said that Mao Sai said that the Confucian Temple has even finalized the gift for you. Qin Pingon asked curiously, which sentence is it? Confucian disciples, as long as they become sages or gentlemen of the academy, can receive a gift from the academy mountain chief or a sage to accompany the sages. If you are serving as an academy sacrificial wine, a minister of industry, or a mountain leader of the Confucian 72 Academy, you will be able to receive the words of Lixing, Yaxing and Wenxing. If you are the leader of the Confucian Temple with the first and third deputy, it is said that the most holy teacher personally cut and deleted a sentence of beautiful meaning from a certain book. Xiago looked playful, glanced at Shanjuchen and asked, The Shanju is so good at guessing his mind, do you need me to tell me? Qin Pingon smiled and said, Why ask the question when you know it? Xiaomo was confused. Xiago nodded and said, Mao Sai explained it together. It seems that Master Wenxing read a sentence from a certain book on the other side of the book, because there is a red pen next to the sentence in the book. Qin Pingon nodded, already guessing the answer. Sure enough, what Xiago said was exactly as Qin Pingon expected. His heart moved slightly and then he thought about it, but Qin Pingon broke up the ripples in his heart. Qin Pingon changed the subject and said to them in his heart, Xiaomo, I have discussed with Zhang Jiao and he will help me pass a message to senior brother Zhou Xian. Senior brother Zhou Xian will rush back to Howren World soon. I have already written a letter. A letter sent to the Confucian Temple, to let you take a trip to the bright moon in the Qingming world so that you can reminisce with the old master. You can stay there for a while, don't rush back to Luopao Mountain, I'm going to retreat soon anyway. Xiago asked tentatively, Mountain Master, can I accompany Xiaomo? Qin Pingon smiled and said, I wrote it in the letter, but it is hard to say whether it will be rejected by the Confucian Temple. Xiaomo said, Xiago, you'd better stay in the mountains, otherwise I won't feel relieved to leave. When I'm not with you, you have to help protect the customs. He and the cave owner of Bixiao Cave in Luobaotan are indeed close friends who regard each other as confidants. Just as Qin Pingon was about to speak, Xiago had already stopped abruptly, straightened his chest like his own right guardian and said solemnly, If there is a slight misunderstanding, bring your head up and see Xiaomo. Xiaomo laughed softly and said, Everything is fine. The young master will definitely be able to break through the situation smoothly. You just need to accompany the millet and eat melon seeds. Xiago just wanted to speak. Qin Pingon said, Miss Xia, when you hear this kind of heartwarming words that are better than love words, can't you squeeze out a few tears? You two just care about me and me all the way when I, the mountain master, don't exist, right? I can't disgust you. Xiago sighed and said understandingly, It seems that the mountain master wants to be the mountain master's wife. Xiaomo smiled and nodded, rarely echoing Xiago once. It's human nature, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Shut up. Qin Pingon, who was walking among them, seemed to be furious, stretched out his arms and put his arms around Xiaomo's neck, and held down the sable hat on Xiago's head with one hand. In this picture, seeing Aunt Feng under the grape trellis in the fire temple, I just felt it was an eye-opener. On the road, Xiaomo smiled all over, Xiago pursed his lips and Qin Pingon was very calm, just like a teenager. Aunt Feng, who was sitting on top of Sherdang, closed the book. She envied them. No matter who it is, it will be the first to enter the 14 realms. The other two, no matter where or in the world, if there is a difficulty to overcome, it must be Jinguang who will arrive first. After a while, Xianxia will arrive later. Qin Pingon did not ask Wei Shanjun to help, but chose to take a ferry back to Nujiadu. After all, Wei Shanjun must be busy holding a night banquet right now. In the evening, Qin Pingon took Xiaomo and sat on the roof of the ferry to drink together. Xiego went to buy a few snacks and sat beside Xiaomo. She complained a lot and the price was too embarrassing. Xiego was the most heroic in drinking, but he was not good at persuading him to drink. She quickly fell back and said that she couldn't drink anymore, she would have to drink anymore. She laughed and looked at Xiaomo. The bright moon is bright and reunited, and the moonlight shines long and far away from people. The clouds overshadowed the moon hazy. Xiaoma picked up a peanut, chewed it carefully and asked in his heart, "Young master has often forgotten something recently and he only remembered it after talking to someone. Is it to prepare for retreat?" Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. Thoughts give rise to thoughts and hair grows like 100 flowers all the way. It's hard, but it's hard to think about it. You can ask me any question such as what we saw and heard in the capital of Dali. Xiaomo smiled and asked, "Young master, do you still remember that gift? Heart Lake is like fishing. Hook bait is the word for gift. It catches like a fish." Qin Pingon remembered a long list of memories about this sentence. Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. "This gift from the Confucian temple comes from the Tianluan, written by my husband. It is the saying that the gentleman respects those who belong to himself, but does not admire those who belong to heaven." But Qin Pingon soon forgot, he really forgot. Qin Pingon shook his head without thinking much. Xiaomo didn't continue to say anything. He raised his glass and Qin Pingon gently bumped against it and said with a smile, "When it comes to drinking, a glass is not as good as a bowl. The clouds on the horizon are brighter than the moon." Qin Pingon said in his heart. The self with a pair of golden eyes, he is above those gates called forgetting, jumping up and down like a child playing a game of jumping squares. Inside a small Taoist temple in the Qingming world. "Qin Song, it turned out to be me, Qin Pingon. Uncle Chong, it turns out it's you, big brother." Sword of Coming Chapter 1182. Chapter 1182. A lonely city among colorful clouds, the mountain gate of Luopa Mountain. A burly man with a sword-backed boy wearing a tiger hat on his head descended from the sky together. Jun Qian smiled and said, "It's here." Bai Yi also glanced at the trends and knots of Luopao Mountain's stretches of peaks, nodded and said, "Feng Shui is good." Jun Qian said, "The atmosphere is better." Xianwei changed the book in his hand, got up quickly and asked, "Who are the two distinguished guests?" Jun Qian cupped her fists and said, "My name is Lu Shirlu, and am your senior brother Jun Qian. This is my friend Bai Yi." Xianwei was startled again and then held back his laughter, his face sullen, almost unable to hold back. He had an idea and hurriedly made a bow, bowed his head and said, "The year of the Taoist priest, the Taoist named Xianwei, thanks to the love of the mountain master. Now he is the gatekeeper of Luopao Mountain, and Xiaodao has met Lu Xianxia and Bai Jianxian here. The first time I was startled, I heard that the other party turned out to be the senior brother Jun Qian of Qin Shanzhu, and then I was shocked when I heard that Bai Yi just looked at the other party's appearance and attire." Aware of the other party's hairpin, Jun Qian was actually taken aback. "Little junior brother, who can abduct such a playful and lovely millet grain, how can you still bring this? Taoist priest?" Thousands of years ago the two sides had met each other a lot, so it could be considered that they didn't know each other. At that time Jun Qian belonged to going to visit. Of course she never played. Fortunately, the first Taoist priest in the world had a good temper and didn't care about anything. Xianwei straightened his waist and raised his head, wondering in his heart, why didn't the white-haired boy show up immediately? After serving as the music editor in the past, as long as a guest came to the door, the white-haired boy was guaranteed to be there at the first time. Why did he desert today? Jun Qian asked with a smile. "Master Xianwei, where are our millets?" Wei Xian replied with a smile. "Today's morning class on the mountain patrol has ended. Recently I like to go to Huanghu Mountain to patrol. Most of the time I went there." Jun Qian snorted. Little junior brother seems to have a lot of big people coming to this mountain recently. Xianwei thought about it for a while and still said something to the handsome young man. "Bai Jianxian, the name is good." Bai also asked, "How?" Xianwei was a little embarrassed. What should I say? Originally it was a polite remark. What do you want Xiaodao to say? The scene was a little stiff, but unfortunately Jiao Lao Shenxian, who never knew what the cold scene was in the world, was not there. Jun Qian explained with a smile. "Xianwei Daoist, he is Bai Yi." Xianwei felt helpless. The teenagers all claimed to be Bai Yi and he didn't call him anything. Jun Qian said, There is an unwritten rule that you should drink a cup of tea before climbing a mountain. How do you say it? Bai Yi said, then do as the locals do. Zhou Xian took Bai Yi to the table and sat down. In fact, Zhou Xian just wanted to be here, drinking a cup of melon seeds while drinking tea, so she had to wait for the little girl who was the right protector of Luopao Mountain for her younger brother. As for what his friend Bai thinks, it doesn't matter anyway. A little girl in black seemed to have received a message and hurriedly climbed the mountain from the back mountain, then passed the top of Jilling Peak and flew all the way down the mountain. Senior brother Zhou of the Good Man Mountain Master, I have seen it for a long time. The rumors from the outside world are all deceptive. How can I have a bad temper? It's a sword fairy with a big table. That Mr. Zhou Xian is equally amazing, so it will be more friendly. There is also a pair of fists with big bowls, just like the book says, the heroes go all over the world and their fists are invincible all over the world. Luopao Mountain's right protector, after all, is a chi trainer, and he ran with sweat all over his head. Behind the little girl in black, followed by a boy with white hair. Without the grains of millet standing in the way, the editorial officer really didn't dare to show up today. It was the white-haired boy who carried the millet to the foot of the back mountain, but the millet said to put it down, and insisted on running all the way to the gate of the front mountain. The white-haired boy had no choice but to run like the wheel of a car on two legs with a grain of millet. The millet ran faster and faster past the mountain gate archway, stood still and said with a grin, Mr. Zhou Xian, it's coming. Zhou Xian had already stood up and said with a smile, Xiaoli, I'll keep you waiting. Zhou Xian glanced at Bai Yi, who felt helpless and had to stand up. Millet Grain looked at the young man wearing a tiger hat. His face was strained and his two pale yellow brows were wrinkled. Although the little girl was actually holding back her laughter to outsiders, it might be more like she was sulking. Bai also seemed to find it interesting and said with a smile, if you want to laugh, just laugh. Millet scratched her face, then shook her head vigorously like a rattle. It is rare for the white-haired boy to be so restrained, and he said timidly, Mr. Zhou Xian and this Bai. Immortal Master, I am the editor of the genealogy. According to the rules of our mountain, record a name? Bai Yi said, my name is Bai Yi, a native of Haoren Middle Earth Shenzhou, and now I practice in Qingmingshan Xianxia Temple. Millet snorted. She secretly gave a thumbs up to Mr. Zhou Xian. When Xianwei heard the words, his body crooked, he fell directly from the bamboo chair to the ground, accidentally dropped the book from his sleeve, and kicked him towards Brother Daifeng's house with lightning speed. Yemo felt so disrespectful to the book, so he tiptoed over there, turned his back to the table, picked up the book, sighed, patted it lightly and put it in his sleeve. He took out a sage book from the other sleeve, then turned around, pretended to hold it in his hand and sat down on the bamboo chair again to start reading. The white-haired boy recorded the two visitors in the book and they slipped away. Sitting at the table, there is already tea on the table to entertain guests. Daoist Xianwei is very good at handling people and things, and there is no leakage. The millet looked at Mr. Zhou Xian and Lu Shilu looked at the millet. Will it be a bit shabby? Just don't worry, of course not. A large handful of melon seeds from the sleeves of millet grains were piled up on Bai Yi's side, and a large handful was also brought to Mr. Zhou Xian. Then the little girl was a little embarrassed and wanted to open her beloved cotton satchel. Bai Yi smiled and gave half of the seeds to the little girl in black. Although Wei Bo wondered why Zhu Lian and Jiang Shangzhen didn't show up at the mountain gate immediately, he still rushed over to the Luopa mountain table. Wei Bo bowed and said, Wei Bo, the little of Piyun Mountain, has met Mr. Lu, Mr. Bai. Zhou Xian stood up and bowed to the Wei Shanjun. Bai also looked indifferent, just nodded in greeting. If he was willing to pay attention to this kind of red tape, Bai Yi would not have chosen the dojo on the island that was solitary overseas. Wei Bo asked, do you want Xiaoshan to talk to Lord Qin Shan? Zhou Xian smiled and waved. No, let the younger brother do his own business first. We don't need to pay attention to him here. Bai is so happy that no one cares. The action of the millet grains opening the cotton satchel and taking out the dried fish stopped. Zhou Xian added, except for millet, of course. Millet grains grinned happily, handing out small dried fish. Bai also glanced at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian smiled and said, eat, why are you standing there? I've tasted it and it tastes pretty good. Bai also had to pick up a dried fish from the stream and chew it carefully. Seeing the little girl secretly looking at herself from the corner of her eye, she had no choice but to say, it tastes good. The millet was excited and took out a bag of dried fish from the cotton bag and put it on the table. She slapped the bag again and said decisively, There's more. Bai was speechless. Zhou Xian laughed. My friend Bai Yi also has today. Lu Chen first sent a secret letter to Xian Duguan, saying that it is not too much to say that it is a family letter. Pindao and Xuanduguan are so familiar with him, and visiting there is like going home, and the whole world knows it. As for the fact that before leaving Haoran world he did a little favor to Master Qin Shanzhu, is that a help? Pindao and Qin Shanzhu, those are the best friends who met at the end of Qingping. Then it was a real excursion. In Nanhua City, it was rare for Lu Chen to fast, bathe and change clothes. Along the way, Lu Chen, wearing a lotus crown, waded through the water and saw many bizarre and unimaginable things. 2 robes with large sleeves dragged out dazzling colorful glass colors. It's a pity that no one can see this scene along the way. Finally, Lu Chen met a passerby, but unfortunately the other person's figure disappeared in a flash, and Lu Chen didn't have time to speak. Afterwards, I met a big barefooted man who was as big as a mountain compared to Lu Chen. Every time he took a step there was a thunderous vibration. The water splashed under his feet was often mixed with countless glass splashing in all directions. Fragments. Lu Chen rolled up his sleeves and pocketed a few nearby pieces of slightly larger glass. Lu Chen and the fellow Daoist who didn't know whether to go to the future or return to the past laughed and thanked them, but they were burly and strong. Han just buried his head and ran wildly, ignoring it. Wandering in the long river of time, being able to meet a pedestrian on the road is already as difficult as going to the sky, and trying to see the face of the other party is even more difficult than going to the sky. Lu Chen didn't dare to count the moment. There were countless vortexes in the river under his feet, and he would fall into it if he was not careful, especially when he encountered some truly enlightened people in the now. The river water touched the stone and swayed. Lu Chen didn't want to lie in a nest somewhere for hundreds of years in a dangerous scene. As for the occasional glimpses of the shore on the road, they are all vague picture fragments. After watching it, if you want to remember that Rao is as high as Lu Chen, you will be a little dizzy because each picture symbolizes with an indescribable mystery. I don't know how long it took, but thanks to Lu Chen's preparations, every time he walked in the long river of time for 3,000 years, it was an experience. Plus Lu Chen was pulled into the great world by the Buddha back then, so the years passed. Even if it is almost infinitely long, it is still not a difficult problem for Lu Chen. Otherwise, if you change it to the general 14 realms, I am afraid that you will be tortured by this kind of empty and nothing and no realm, and your Taoist heart will fall. Lu Chen finally stopped and let out a long breath. When he arrived, he was finally found by himself. A large pile of blue and purple talismans in the 2 large sleeves of the Taoist robe has been reduced to ashes. The scene in front of Lu Chen's eyes was as if he had come to a vast and boundless water surface, as flat as a mirror surface, with gravel under his feet, countless, colorful and splendid. The surface of the water is like a thin layer of colored glass, and the gravel, in fact, when you look closely, every sand is a star just spread one after another. In the extreme distance where Lu Chen exhausted his eyesight, there was a long chain like an iron chain across the river, like a line spanning the sky and the earth. If you have to name it, you can probably call it cause and effect. But Lu Chen still hadn't found the ancient he wanted to talk to. The identity of the guardian, one of the priesthoods, is the late dead and the offender who guard the long river of time. However, even if he went back home now, it was a worthwhile trip, and he finally saw a large number of living creatures, including ancient ghosts and gods. There is a woman who can't see her face clearly, wearing a long cyan dress. Her robe is slowly swaying, and she has the beauty of the dress and belt of a painted lady. She was sitting on her knees, with a small table in front of her, and a few simple-style pottery drinking utensils on it. There is a suspended giant mountain that is constantly sinking, which is about higher than the 5 mountains of Middle-earth put together. But the truth may be shorter than a grain of dust in the vast world. On the top of the mountain, there was a man with no head on his neck holding his head. Above his head, his eyes were as many as holes in a beehive. After discovering Lu Chen, he blinked or closed his eyes, making a buzzing sound. A strange being who kept talking, writing with his fingers and chanting the 2 words of the Buddha in his nasal voice, seemed not to like being interrupted and exclaimed, "Noisy." After a while, this strange existence began to repeat the 2 words, "freedom." Occasionally it will be slightly different, and the strange existence will cry and mutter to himself, not knowing cause and effect. Not enough, far from enough. On a high snow-white platform that seems to have been tempered with countless pieces of snow, There are various altars for sacrifices. Probably someone who used ancient methods to entertain the gods and seek longevity. The next door of the high platform is an ancient wooden boat with a purple robe, painted with dragons floating on the bow. He sneered in ancient words. The road is cut off and you still want to lead the world. How can you be insignificant? There is a man with extremely long eyebrows and extremely white skin. He looks like a real person from ancient times. It is probably rare to see guests here. His face gradually became clearer and his appearance was handsome, but it was still difficult to hide the bleakness of his eyes. Sitting cross-legged near the long chain with a halberd on his knees, perhaps it was too long since he had spoken seriously, his voice was as hoarse as a knife grindstone and he asked with a smile, "Who is from when and where?" It's just that he quickly laughed at himself. You must not understand it. Starting from that incident, after all, it has been 8,000 years. Lu Chen couldn't understand the other party's words, but he figured it out. I know it's a Qi trainer from a long time ago. This at least means that in the long future, there are still Qi practitioners who can come here, which is good. Just thinking about it again, it doesn't seem to be necessarily. What if the martial artist is pure enough? There was a woman with 2 eyebrows shaved. She raised the back of her hand slightly, looked, and then raised her head, looking at the Taoist priest who was a guest from afar. In addition, there is a group of existences, shadows looming. According to Lu Chen's rough calculation, most of them are drawn by the road with the wild. That's right, the monks of the monster race are born with strong physical bodies, and they can reach the top of the mountain faster. They are not afraid of the sky and the earth. They always like to break all the old rules and new rules with their hands. An old-fashioned man with a high crown on his head, staggering and swaying, came to a dozen steps in front of Lu Chen's eyes, and asked in wild and elegant words, "Is Lu Fian dead?" Lu Chen smiled and replied, "If the senior is old friends with him, you can cry. If you have a grudge, you can let it go. You don't need to take any revenge because Lu Fian has already been eaten by someone." The old man Gao Guan nodded and stared at the young Taoist priest. Lu Chen asked with a wild and elegant smile, "Dare to ask the senior's name?" The old man Gao Guan narrowed his eyes and said, "I don't have a Taoist name. I used a pseudonym to stamp my feet. Let me think about it. I have to think about it carefully. I think about it. I haven't done anything major, just killing the savage martial artist. Hee, these guys, all eyes are higher than the top, except that you can't go to the ring and ask boxing. Everything is good." The chicken Lu Chen, pecking at the rice, nodded vigorously. "I once asked an expert about boxing, what would happen if the opponent did not cooperate with the stiletto and handle? Senior, guess how the expert answered? The answer, it's very interesting. He said that if you have 100,000 kinds of boxing, you will be the king of 8 boxing when you enter the ring and divide your life and death." The old man Gao Guan nodded and said, "The masters have great views. It's a pity that I can't see them anymore." Lu Chen nodded vigorously and said, don't see it. I'm afraid that the senior will be killed by him with 2 or 3 punches." The old man Gao Guan stared at Lu Chen for a while. "I believe you, I have really seen that guy." Lu Chen took a step forward and the old man stepped back all the way and said with a smile, "A good Taoist priest, shouldn't you focus on what kind of swordsmanship you learn?" With one move, a wild monster at the peak of the Ascension realm was frightened away. Lu Chen stopped and said triumphantly, "I can't scare you, old man, to death." The old man hesitated for a while, but chose to continue to retreat, and finally his figure dissipated in a cloud of white mist. Lu Chen squatted down, stretched out his palm and pressed his palm lightly on the surface of the glazed water. Looking down, I seemed to see a butterfly fluttering in the water. A pair of extremely pure golden eyes slowly opened, overlooking the young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown. For this ancient high-ranking deity, even if the Taoist priest is thousands of years old, he is still young. No words, no voices, no ripples. Like a drum, like thunder, like a surging river. "Lu Chen, you tried to cross the border 3,000 years ago. Do you want to try again and violate the law again?" Lu Chen's body swayed, so he had to retract his hand, sighed softly, raised his sleeves, shook out a futon and fell onto the water. Lu Chen sat on the futon with his hands on his stomach silently and began to concentrate, sitting and forgetting, his heart fasted. There was an ancient Taoist priest standing on the head of an ancient vicious beast, dragging close to it upstream. "That little newbie Taoist priest, what are you doing here? Is it the perfect Ascension realm or the 14th realm? Within the Taoist legal system, who do you call master? Hurry up and listen." Lu Chen turned a deaf ear. It doesn't matter who you are, the first Taoist priest in this world and the dumb boy who liked to hang on the tail of the long queue, but they are all Taoist priests of seniority. Why don't you call your ancestors and grandpas? You take a huge advantage. After you go back, I guarantee that you can brag about it with anyone. Lu Chen just held his breath, and with every breath, the true qi condensed between his nostrils, like two white snakes hanging down, and the Taoist priest's heel was the same scene. Xiao newbie, I can't see it, you are really good, but I don't know if you have been here for a long time and you can still show off like this. I can't say that it is not as good as those poor worms, let alone swallowing infuriating facial features and internal organs are all to be flattened. Little Taoist priest, talk to your grandfather and see. There are many qi practitioners who are not as high or low as yours in the world today. Are there any number of hands in the world? It doesn't matter if you don't say anything. You just need to tell me, was that dumb little Taoist priest who saw that everyone was virtuous, and was someone beaten up to find his teeth? Hearing this, Lu Chen finally opened his eyes and touched his nose. He is the master of Xiaodao Senior. You wait, Xiaodao will invite the master to come over and reminisce with the senior. Forget it, I don't have much hatred with him. We had a normal relationship back then. After that, the ancient Taoist priest really stopped talking. That strange being who seemed to have cultivated the outsiders Yehu Chan, in fact, had been listening carefully to the conversation between Lu Chen and the Taoist priest, and when he learned that the young Taoist priest was indeed a Taoist priest, he was suddenly disappointed and burst into tears. The woman who likes to raise her hands like a white jade bow waved to Lu Chen and smiled sweetly. Master, is there a new master in Xianxia now? Lu Chen slapped his head and said, returning to the senior's words, now that there is no Xianxia in the world, how can you talk about the master? The woman's expression was complicated in an instant, and she seemed to be both shy and smiling. The so-called foxes in later generations on her side would be ashamed of themselves. You came here neither out of bounds nor back. What do you want to do? To prevent anyone from coming here, have a game with my senior brother. Do easy. If you exchange 114 realm for 114 realm. Of course, Lu Chen's senior brother lost even more. Definitely can't do this kind of loss-making business. They said, Lu Chen, you have your reasons and I have my responsibilities. You can't stay here for a long time and go back. Lu Chen said aggrieved, my brother didn't come here often before, why don't you chase people away? They said, it's different, Ko's name Yufeng is almost divine, and it is already a supernatural power. Lu Chen's eyes mournfully said, the poor man asks the heart to interpret dreams, it's almost magical. They said, Tao Fa and supernatural power are different after all. Lu Chen asked, can't you open one eye and close the other? They said, what do you say? Lu Chen just fell backwards and quickly reached out his hand against the surface of the water so he didn't fall to the ground. The gods said, they can't leave, they must stay here. Why do you, Lu Chen, spend your life here in vain? Lu Chen jumped up and got up. The futon was burned by the thunder and lightning of several thin threads, and finally it was like water flowing. Another stagger. After that, Lu Chen's feet seemed to be muddy, and every time Lu Chen moved he would bring out mud as heavy as mountains. In an instant, Lu Chen's figure rose from the ground and his figure floated horizontally. When he landed, he seemed to slap his feet and his knee joints creaked. In fact, this is why Lu Chen had been at the Yunluan before, why he would fall backwards while sitting on the railing. And why did he slap his feet when he was at the Dragon Elephant Sword sect? Lu Chen raised his hand, put his fingers together, pulled gently and said angrily, if you are so aggressive, Xiaodao will use his real skills. As if twisting a curtain with two fingers, Lu Chen lifted a corner. In an instant, between the heaven and the earth, which was originally bright as the day, there were countless lights that were as dark as ink, penetrating into this world like a tide. The gods shouted, stop. Lu Chen hurriedly stretched out his hand and knocked the pitch black back into the curtain. Then he seemed to let go of his fingers and lowered the curtain again. Lu Chen said angrily, it's Xiaodao's gaffe. A laughter sounded like the echo of the valley but also like the rolling of thunder. Although it is a dog jumping over the wall, it does have a bit of Taoism and it is worthy of being a direct disciple of Taoist ancestors. Lu Chen put his hands on his hips and put on a scolding posture. Sneaky, what are you talking about? You can dance if you have the ability? As for the identity of the other party, Lu Chen was very clear. It is under the jurisdiction of the ancient Heavenly Court Thunder Department, and now the is still there. De Li Jingqing, the guy who worked as a driver for Nanzong, used to be in charge of Zhangkan Division. This is half the boss of the old coachman. But it is still not one of the 12 high-ranking gods. He asked, will Ma Kuxuan die? Lu Chen said angrily. It was said back then that he would let go of a horse, and Pin Dao has already saved him once. Otherwise he would have been beaten to death by Qin Pingon long ago. So what about Pin Dao? The gods remained silent and retreated to the divine position. Lu Chen breathed a sigh of relief. The conscience of heaven and earth is only a few moments of impoverishment. Although this deity has always hoped that Ma Kuxuan can enlighten, and then embark on a divine way. However, the dojo of the old thunder gods in the world is not the Zhenwu mountain where Ma Kuxuan practiced. Zhenwu mountain, one of the ancestral families of the Aquarius continent, is actually one of the dojos of another god. If this really started to ask questions, Lu Chen would have to make a slap in the face before speaking properly, and he had to be polite. After all, whether it's senior master headmaster or senior brother Yu, they are extremely respectful to this virtuous deity. Because in the ancient times about 6,000 years ago, a group of majestic existences with new god names appeared. The god named Daijia, who traveled around Sui Mountain in Middle Earth, as well as those land-based real people with their own mountain governance, all appeared at about the same time. And the patriarchs of the three sects all recognize these divine names. For example, one of the gods is called Zhenwu. In the Qingming world, the Baiyujing, the heavenly transformation heavenly demon, in addition to being afraid of the Daoist ancestor, is also afraid of this true martial arts god. There is another osmanthus tree on the moon which blooms in spring, and the osmanthus is reigning in the sky. This goddess can be regarded as a female who fills a part of the vacancy, and her name is Guanghan. It's just that she was always reluctant to return to that dojo. Lu Chen stretched out his hand to his ear and waited for a long time without hearing anything, then retracted his hand and said tentatively, each one step back? Still silent, Lu Chen felt relieved, and this was the promise. Lu Chen's figure dissipated, stopped in one place and reappeared. He no longer saw the lively scene before, and there was a vast white fog. The Taoist priest wearing the lotus crown is all alone. Only the dead in the heaven and the earth can't give up day and night. Lu Chen's expression was unprecedentedly solemn, without the slightest bit of normal air. Then the poor road is here, waiting for the white Emperor Qing to be in the middle. In Huaihuang County, an old house that has never been sold to outsiders. Dong Shuijing opened the door and said with a smile, Yo, isn't this Lin Yupu? It's an honor to come here. Lin Shi stepped over the threshold and stretched out his hand. Don't talk nonsense, hurry up. Dong Shuijing wondered, why? Lin Shi said, congratulations. Dong Shuijing was amused. You are learning from Wei Shanjun. Lin Shi said, I borrowed some Guyu money from Qin Pingon, and I have to return it to him sooner. Dong Shuijing smiled and said, scare me, I thought you were going to get married. Lin Shi raised his foot and gestured to kick someone, but Dong Shuijing turned sideways and said with a smile, a scholar speaks and does not do anything. If he used the words of Qin Shanju, the two chickens out of the cage peck each other. Lin Shi said, old rules, sloppy. Dong Shuijing went to the kitchen to make a fire and served 2 bowls of wontons. When Dong Shuijing was busy, Lin Shi, who was sitting at the table of the 8 immortals in the main room, turned his head and stared blankly at the willow tree in the courtyard. As for the well beside the tree, Lin Yupu didn't even see it. By the time Dong Shuijing brought a big bowl of steaming wontons in one hand, Lin Shi had already withdrawn his sight. Lin Shi took the bowl and chopsticks and asked, do you know what Qin Pingon called us to come over this time? Dong Shuijing shook his head and said, I didn't ask. As soon as Lin Shou ate the wontons, he began to pick and choose. Dong Shuijing didn't even bother to listen, so he lowered his head to eat. When I was in the school, I didn't like this guy, not because Lin Shi was a child of a rich family, but he liked to put on a bad face every day. Afterwards, Dong Shuijing was even more displeased with Lin Shi. She is the same age as the two of them, and she is Li Huai's sister. That wicker-like slender woman, and she is still so gentle. Dong Shuijing asked, how much do you owe Qin Pingon? Lin Shi said, 100. Dong Shuijing nodded and said, he'll give you a cushion first. Lin Shi said, Guyu Qian. Dong Shuijing pretended to be surprised. I thought it was Xiaoxue Qian. Lin Shi scolded the rich man. Dong Shuijing said, you have such a good relationship with Qin Pingon. Why are you willing to owe me a favor? Lin Shi said, the Dadu is excavated in Tongyi's Hao, and there are places where money is needed. Dong Shuijing said, I don't have a place to spend money? Lin Shou pouted, you Dong Banqing only have a place to make money. I have to admit that this guy Dong Shuijing is really a good material for earning money. Lin Shou admired him just by talking about one of the businesses. He packaged up several immortal hilltops with good spiritual energy, especially with clear water veins and fiddled with some potted plants, specially pitting the silver of the generals, ministers and dignitaries under the mountains. The euphemism is to save money for the children and grandchildren. If there are 1 or 2 potted plants, the Shantao Xinfu will carefully record the files, and according to the requirements of each customer, make an appointment in advance, and the descendants must be taken home in a certain year. Of course, they can also be on the spot. Converting it into fairy money, taking things in advance or changing money is not acceptable. Unless the real family is in trouble and they are too poor to open the pot, as long as the children of the family go up the mountain, they can exchange for a slightly discounted immortal money. The fairy mansion that cultivates bonsai can even help keep a family tree. Anyway, that's the thing. No matter how big or small, everything is covered. Lin Shi heard that there were indeed a large number of dignitaries and gentry from various countries. He was tempted and they all paid for it. The countries under the mountain followed countless trends at once. For this purpose, Lin Shi had to admire Dong Shuijing's business experience. This is just one of many business lines for Dong Shuijing. Dong Shuijing scolded for no reason, useless. Lin Shou glared at him and said, a trash worse than me. The chicks started pecking at each other again. There are clouds above the layers of clouds, and at the bottom of the clouds is the human world. Ma Yuan drank wine and his poetry flourished, but he had to prepare a preface first. Unlike many scholars, Ma Yuan likes to recite and excerpt the prefaces of various poems and songs by himself. Zhao Yao, the servant of the Ministry of Punishment, took a ferry belonging to the military of Dali. This time, Zhao Yao returned to his hometown with Ma Yuan, his immediate superior, and Guan Yiran, a member of the Ministry of Housing and Qing officials. Zhao Yao was called by that little uncle, and Guan Yiran was a fake public servant who came here to see his friends by the way, the lord of Luopao Mountain Qin Shanzhu and Jing Quan, who had been the prefect of Baoshi County for a few days. Are the kind of good friends who can even vomit when drinking plain wine in Changpu River. The ferry boat bypasses the Beiwepiyun mountain far away, which means that it is close to Nujiadu. Ma Yuan stood leaning on the railing at the outdoor viewing platform and tapped the railing lightly. Seeing this beautiful scenery, he was moved and began to recite poems. Zhao Yao and Guan Yiran were sitting in the house drinking, and Guan Yiran turned around and said with a smile, Uncle Ma, you are writing again. Do you want me to help you compile your thousands of limericks into a book and then find a bookstore to spend the money on? The money is printed? No worries about sales. There are so many yamen in the capital. As long as it is an official below the 2nd rank, above the 9th rank, and 1 handbook, my capital will be recovered. This deal is done. If you add more with the capital, you can make a lot of money. The interrupted Master Shang Shu didn't turn his head, just raised a finger. Zhao Yao smiled and said, if Lord Shang Shu really wants to publish a book of poems, even if he doesn't follow official relations, he just uses a pseudonym, and he doesn't have to worry about selling it at all. Guan Yiran teased, Zhao Shilang, how can you be an official? Don't do this kind of flattery sooner. Our Uncle Ma is going to Sunfall Ferry soon. Will you burn a cold stove? Zhao Yao asked directly, isn't it in the wild world still holding the title of Shangshu? Will you step down? Guan Yiran raised his chin. This kind of thing only the high officials who are qualified to participate in the small court meeting in the imperial study room know about it. You ask the right master. Ma Yuan walked back to the house and said, you don't need to step down. Anyway, we have you as a servant in the Ministry of Punishment, and you won't be able to make mistakes. Besides, in the 6 yamen, the high position can't be completely stationary, but it can't be too frequent. Guan Yiran laughed and said, for Zhao Shilang, this is not good news. We have to drink wine to drown one's worries. Come, Zhao Shilang, let's go. Zhao Yao was a little helpless. The contemporary head of the Ma family in Shangzhou Kingdom not long ago was actually the minister of the household, and was transferred to the Ministry of Punishment as the chief official, neither promotion nor demotion. From the original left servant of the Ministry of Punishment, Mu Yan, was promoted to the Minister of Household Affairs, replacing Ma Yuan, and became the minister of a country. The bureaus of the Ministry of Punishment, as well as the cultivators who are named in the Ministry of Punishment, are naturally happy to see it. Regarding that war, which of the 6 chief officials of the Dali court was more responsible, it was only Xianxia or Ma Yuan, and it had nothing to do with Zhao Duanjin, Minister of Rights. Also with the surname of Shangs Huguo, Chao Ping and Yan Jiao, have already gone to the Sunfall Ferry in the Wild World to join Song Chongjing and the feudal king Song Mu. And the owner of the Ma family in Poyang is a bloated man with a face full of flesh. As long as Ma Yuan does not wear official uniforms and steps on his boots, he looks like a rich family in a small county at most. No more the county government, the richest man is unlikely to be Ma Yuan's virtue. But people don't look good. Although Ma Yuan was born with a big and round shoulders, he might be able to scare those timid people walking on the streets of Beijing alone at night. Women are afraid of robbery and men are afraid of robbery. Yes, but this Ma Xiangshu, who has been in charge of Dallas Moneybag for many years, is a very famous and talented man. He has a hairpin in small script and his writing is very consummate. He is the old man of the Zhao family who is the patriarch of the pavilion of the Dali dynasty. It is said that Ma Yuan's small script is exactly the opposite of his appearance. It means that as ugly as Ma Yuan's people are, the characters are as beautiful as they are. And Ma Yuan, as a great minister who is recognized as one of the arms of the national teacher Tuiyu, is indeed a very vulgar official. It is also one of the 2 fastest promotions in Dallas officialdom in recent decades. Ma Yuan in the capital in the north and Lu Qingfeng in the capital in the south. As for why Guan Yiran was able to speak so freely on Ma Yuan's side, it was because Ma Yuan's imperial examination teacher was Guan Yiran's great-grandfather. The iron-clad old minister of the Ministry of Officials, the servant Lang and the middle class of the flowing water. In addition, before Ma Yuan became a high-ranking official of the 3rd rank, every 3 years, Ma Yuan had a major plan to inspect the capital. No matter whether Ma Yuan was an official in Beijing or a local government, he always made a grade A comment without any suspense. This made Ma Yuan, who was born in the Ma family in Poyang, Shangzhou Kingdom, to move 7 times in 3 years in the government office at the beginning. This gave Ma Yuan a coveted official nickname, Vest. Therefore, Ma Yuan, who likes to scold people the most, is the only one who doesn't scold Guan Yiran. Of course, apart from such a relationship, Guan Yiran's accounting, especially his ability to check accounts, is really not bad. In the dark night, the eastern boundary of Aquarius continent has left the Qinghuan kingdom, which is a vassal of Dali. Li Bao, who has been the Minister of Rights for many years, treats the guests in person today. Woman. This young Qi practitioner is a native of Qinghuan country. Li Bao has the appearance of a bookish old man. After he closed his study, he became Li Baozhen, the weaving officer of the Dali dynasty. In the early years when Li Baozhen was serving as a spy, the leader of Dali Lubiting, he changed his official status in Qinghuan kingdom. He was promoted quickly and soon became the Minister of Rights. He has presided over many conferences, and is a well-deserved person in the palm of a country. In addition, Li Baozhen was still in the Qinghuan kingdom. Several of the grand emperors behind the scenes of the vassal states of Dali in the past, the immortal houses on the mountain, and the sects of the rivers and lakes under the mountain were all under Li Baozhen's control. Lu Min didn't want to see Li Baozhen at first, but one of his secret mansion was stolen. There are 2 bowls on the table, 1 bowl of ink and 1 bowl of water. In this study, there are not any sage books, they are all miscellaneous books that are useless for the imperial examinations and useless for the people's hearts. Li Baozhen poured himself a glass of wine, took the lead and sat down, stretched out his hand and pressed it twice, signaling the guest to be polite. Lu Min hesitated for a moment and sat on the opposite chair. Playing against chairs is like a game of chess. Li Baozhen asked with a smile, "Where's Wang Yifu? Have you met each other over the years?" Lu Min was silent. At that time, Lu Min's own master and later Dali accompanied Lu Qingfeng, Minister of Rights of the capital, and served as a parental official in a small county in his hometown of Qinghuan. Wang Yifu was the county captain at the time. Later, when Lu Qingfeng changed places, he went to a birdhouse. The small border county of served as the prefect, and Wang Yifu followed along and served as a coachman all the way. As Lu Qingfeng's book boy or half a student, Lu Min had a good relationship with the outspoken Wei Wang Xian at that time, because the other party often accompanies Lu Qingfeng to drink together. It seems that as long as Lieutenant Wang speaks, he can make his master, who is always frowning slightly alone, think a few more words. I remember one time drinking, Wang Yifu once asked his master a question, wanting to know how he viewed the mountains. Because Lu Min drank alcohol at the time, he couldn't remember too much. But one of the truths of the question and answer between his master and Wang Xianwei has made Lu Min deeply remembered to this day. From my master's point of view, the so-called immortals on the mountain are just ordinary masters with bigger fists. That's all, there are few exceptions. At that time, Lu Qingfeng still had a question which was asked of Lu Min. Of course, it was more likely to be a kind of self-talk and self-questioning by a master, which was related to whether he obeyed the rules, including those who set the rules. Li Baozhen pointed to a booklet on the table and said with a smile, "Lu Min, you are a very cautious person, so I'm even more surprised. What do you think? I don't keep this kind of thing in your mind. Dare to write it down on paper?" On the top of the booklet was an interlocking plan, aimed at a big man who could kill Lu Min with just one finger. The two sides are about the same age, but the realm is too different. Lu Min still did not speak. Li Baozhen asked, "Is it still from Lu Xiangxia's idea? You just help me write it down?" Lu Min finally said, "If it's my master's idea, if you get the booklet, it must be counted." Li Baozhen nodded, "Probably so. I remember watching a snack of Lu Lao Shongshu back then. There was a sect on the mountain with a guilty conscience and he was about to reveal a scandal. He asked Lu Qingfeng to help and Lu Qingfeng helped to fabricate a similar scandal. There was a lot of uproar and the Shanshui Dibao was talking about this. Of course, the result could only prove the innocence of that sect. And then there was another gossip that slandered this sect, and the cultivator began to work hard to prove his innocence. After that, and when the real scandal is reported, they will not take it seriously and will not want to get to the bottom of it. Li Baozhen found Lu Qingfeng and the latter just said it lightly. Of course, in return, the sect with little wealth, smashing pots and selling iron, secretly took the initiative to send a large sum of immortal money to the Luojing household department. Li Baozhen still doesn't know whether the real victim of that scandal was too late to expose a small sect of the enemy's family, whether he had obtained the kind of justice that they were satisfied with, or that they truly recognized in their hearts. As for the booklet on the table, Lu Min recorded the entry point of the plan in it, which was regarded as the first move against Chen Pingon. It is Ruan Xiao of Longquan sword sect. In this way, the sudden fortunes of Qin Pingon and Luo Pashan are more reasonable. Especially benevolent. The two parties have already made a private agreement for life. Then two small sects with Shanshui Dibao to promote this matter were tragically wiped out and died under the sword qi. Of course, no one would believe that this was Luo Pashan's method. But this is the first link, a small foreshadowing. However, some people who are interested may at this stage they will start to guess whether it is Xingyang Mountain's slander and blame. And Wan Qiong of Longquan Jinzong, the chief worshipper of the Dali dynasty, knew that this incident was false, and the content of these Shanshui Di newspapers was even more false. But the relationship with Luopao Mountain? The second link is Shujian Lake, which is related to Gukan. It can be mutually corroborated with a certain landscape travel journal. Li Baozhen turned his head to look at the two bowls of water on the table, smiled and said, "Gukan is the bowl of ink, no matter how you mix it, it's all ink, but Qin Pingon is the bowl of water dipped in a little ink, it starts to turn from clear to turbid." Already. Lu Min nodded, not denying Li Baozhen's point of view. "Lu Min, do you have a grudge against Qin Pingon?" "No. The first time we met, did you find him unpleasant?" "When we first met, I felt that he and my master were ordinary scholars. They were gentle, approachable, able to cultivate themselves, teach others and do things better. The first time we met was on the road outside the lion forest in Qingwan country. In order to make way for a small black charcoal on the road, the ox cart rushed into the pond and they became chickens. But that Qin Pingan's performance at that time made Lu Min feel good. Just like what my master said, no matter what kind of family it is, whether it is a wealthy family or a small family, as long as the child makes a mistake, the adult cannot replace the apology." "Wrong. That's because I think he is very lucky. He became famous at a young age, made great achievements in other places, made a name for himself, and became a disciple of the Confucian temple saint. The Daoist is still the first person in the colorful world. It's all for him. Makes you jealous and thinks the way of heaven is unfair? You want to fight for your master Lu Lao Shangshu?" "I'm not jealous. I have carefully studied his family history. I must admit that all the benefits are what Qin Pingon deserves. In the officialdom of Dali, there are two people who are promoted the fastest, namely Ma Yuan, the chief minister of Dali, and Lu Qingfeng, the minister of ceremonies in the capital. The most interesting thing is that the whole official circle knows that Lu Qingfeng was used by His Majesty the Emperor to monitor Luo Wang Songmu, but the vassal King Songmu always treated each other with courtesy. The reason why Luojing, the companion capital, never became Songmu's Yamen alone, was that there was Lu Qingfeng. The book boy Lu Min and the squire Wang Yifu are the two people who have followed Lu Qingfeng for the longest time. Especially Lu Min, who has been by the master's side since he was young. But Lu Qingfeng was already dead because he was not a cultivator. The old man didn't even think about becoming a deity. But Lu Min would not hate a scholar recognized by his master because of this. Before his death, Lu Qingfeng once joked with Lu Min that the only person who can improve the policies of the national teacher Tuiyu in the future is not in conspiracy, not in trivial deeds that are visible on the surface, but in honesty, in morality, and in people's hearts. Tuiyu deliberately left room for the real deeds, because he personally said that those who learn from me live like me and die. Just like all of Li Baozhen's actions in Qinghuan Kingdom in the eyes of Lu Qingfeng, he just said lightly, "What sense of accomplishment do we have when we hunt for righteousness with injustice?" The key point is that Li Baozhen had to praise the other party sincerely at that time, which was indeed better than himself. The legalist monk Wei Liang once helped the national teacher Tuiyu to set up a monument on the top of Yizhou Mountain. And Lu Qingfeng wrote the genealogy of the gods of Yizhou, which was almost copied by the Confucian temple. Then I'm going to be so strange that I can't understand it at all. There is no injustice and no hatred. What are you asking for by doing this? Nothing to ask for. Hearing this, Li Baozhen was finally surprised instead of pretending and asked, "Lu Min, are you purely malicious?" Lu Min started to shut up again and even closed his eyes. Li Baozhen twisted the empty wine glass in his hand and said with a smile, "Lu Qingfeng must have reminded you at some point during his lifetime that if someone threatened you someday such as me, just betray him and let you have a small life?" Lu Min opened her eyes and nodded. "Li Ziz's magic trick, that's true. The master told me to forget the content of that conversation as soon as possible, otherwise I would definitely not be able to deceive you. The master hopes that he can become the second Li Baozhen, but he is smarter than Li Baozhen, but it is too difficult." Li Baozhen asked, "Do you know why I haven't done this?" Lu Min replied, "Because you guessed that the master would do this. You feel boring. You have always been too lazy to do things that are not interesting." Li Baozhen nodded with a smile. "Accurately speaking, it is meaningless and meaningless." Lu Min asked back, "Then how can you be sure that the master didn't guess that you would do this?" Li Baozhen's smile froze. Lu Min smiled and said, "Li Zhizao doesn't need to pretend. In the final analysis, you are just afraid of a living Lu Xianxia. To be precise, if he is dead you are still afraid because he will leave behind someone specially aimed at you." Li Baozhen smiled brightly and nodded vigorously. "Then I'm going to ask you, is there such a killer?" Lu Min sneered. "I said yes, but you don't want to believe it all. I said no, but you still doubt it. Then if I say yes, I dare to ask Li Zhizao, what is the meaning of this question?" Li Baozhen threw the wine glass back on the table and clapped his hands. "Lu Min, I've finished asking. Do you have anything else to say?" Lu Min closed her eyes. "You and I are just waiting to die." Li Baozhen sneered and said, "You are pretending to be mysterious, pretending to be a ghost. Do you really think you are Lu Qingfeng?" Outside the door of the study there was a soft applause. Lu Min smiled and said, "Come on. I have always kept silent about the name Chen Pingon. You Li Baozhen don't believe in evil." Li Baozhen calmed himself, looked out the door, his face was ashen, and asked, "Who?" Wearing a green shirt and saying goodbye to the hosta as if entering a realm of no one, stepping into the study, "It's really unfortunate Lu Xianxia is gone and I'm still here. If you want to kill Lu Min, it will never be your turn." This man was followed by a young squire with a yellow hat and blue shoes and a green bamboo stick. Li Baozhen asked, "How could it be you?" Coincidentally, Chen Pingon stood behind the chair, stretched out his hand to hold Lu Min's head firmly, twisted it gently and said with a smile, "If you don't learn well, but if you don't learn well, you will really die if you are careful." Li Baozhen wanted to speak with his heart, wanted to call out the name of his eldest brother, but found that he could only be silent, let alone speak. Then Li Baozhen was horrified to discover that Chen Pingon, who was here at this time, actually had a pair of pure golden eyes. A lonely city among colorful clouds. In the White Emperor City, this place where the true and false are confused, there are countless flying swords, the movement is disordered and the speed is uncertain. It was Jing Juzhong who spent 3,000 years to spend money to buy, accept offerings, collect secret realms or copy the originals. Jing Juzhong made and imitated them by himself. Centering comes from the fantasy, through years of deduction and calculus. Jing Juzhong, who looked up at a celestial and star map, withdrew his gaze. This road probably won't work. The other Jing Juzhong shook his head and said, not necessarily. Exhausting the mind of human beings can only be like this. Is it possible to ask others for help? The question is, who can I turn to? There is no Cui Yu in the world. Wait and see. For example, play that game of chess with the headmaster Bai Yujing Ko first. The name of Bai Yujing is a pirate and the Taoism is as high as a dragon. I have dragon slaying skills, please see the sword. Apart from Jing Juzhong, the only cultivators in Beidasheng who have visited this secret realm in history seem to be only the pioneering disciple Fu Su and the closing disciple Gu Kan. The sword repairer Fu Su once sat here for more than a month without getting anything. Gu Kan was even more hopeless than his senior brother Fu Shu, so he just asked his master some very layman questions. Xianxia has a flying sword. If there is no teacher in family learning, he is ignorant. Do you need to find it by yourself? The natal supernatural power of Feijian? Of course it is necessary, but the difference between the difficulty and the easy is huge. The sword cultivator searches for and investigates the magical powers of flying swords, such as diving into the water to find fish. It is somewhat obscure and the water is deep, so you need to patiently. Some are simple but you can see it. You don't have to work hard. As for the depth of the water and the shallowness of the water, it has nothing to do with the rank of Feijian, it's all luck. Many Fijians' supernatural powers are clearly like a dragon swimming in the shallows. Sword repair is easy and you can pull the dragon's beard. Go ashore and become one's own possessions. Some natal supernatural powers are like a small fish swimming on the bottom of the sea. Jianxiu spends a lot of effort to find them, but he still gains very little. He can only laugh at himself. The great monks who are famous in one continent are actually sword cultivators with hidden identities, but they are embarrassed to admit that they are sword cultivators. So I was ashamed to open my mouth and dared not to call myself a sword cultivator. To say that there are almost no Xianxia cultivators in the world, the reason is that the sects on the mountain are looking for sword cultivators outside and they spare no effort. Carefully sculpted and cultivated at the expense of financial resources, and the birth of a flying sword of life, there are traces to follow: the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Beiju Luzhou, the ancient Shu boundary of Aquarius Island, and several other feng shui in Howran treasure land. The possibility of sword cultivators appearing is far more than other places. Having two or more natal flying swords or a flying sword with several natal supernatural powers, does it have an innate advantage? For Jianxiu himself, of course, this is the case. Between Feijian and Feijian, as well as between the natal supernatural powers that retreat, the explanation of the two is similar, or the complementary of the two is opposite. There are different degrees of gain. But if you put it in all sword repairs in history, it is not necessarily true. For example, your master has only one flying sword of destiny, but all flying swords related to the water method can be repaired by thousands of swords. The flying swords are stacked on top of each other, and the one facing them is still like a group of ministers seeing the monarch, so they can only bow their heads. Is it a question from a university about the name of each flying sword? I heard that the name of the flying sword is Takeo Yamashita's boxing move. It should not be rumored or leaked. Excluding that kind of sword cultivator's name, or the blind man touching the elephant, a flying sword, if the name is too big, is an empty shelf that is not worthy of the name, and the name and the reality will clash, and then affect the flying sword's life and supernatural powers. If you are young, you will lose everything because it means that the confused sword cultivator has not yet figured out the true connection between the flying sword and the supernatural power of life. Disciple only has one last question. The origin of Feijian can only depend on life. It's all destiny beyond fate. You said that Jianxiu can only rely on fate. It's not wrong, but it's not enough. Between the colorful clouds stands a large scorpion, and the stone table below it is carved with a chessboard, and there are 2 tins of chess pieces on it. There was an old man in a blue shirt with his hands behind his head. The phrase, "blessing the world first," is well known in the world. Han Qiao's heartfelt voice sounded, "Senior brother, master has come to Baidi City." Jing Juzhong said, "Let him wait a moment, it'll go over immediately." If you just learn swordsmanship for Jing Juzhong, it can't be said that there is no benefit at all, but it is of little significance. Because Jing Juzhong has already tried it. Therefore Jing Juzhong completely abandoned this path. A young god who was pure sword cultivation in the Ascension realm was in the body and outer body. Facts have proved that even if it is a pure sword cultivator of the 14th realm, there is still a long way to go from the avenue that Jing Ju thought in the center. Then there is a sword outside the sword and the technique seeks the Tao. The road that Bai Yi took back then was not bad. The two Jing Juzhong merged into one, looked at the flying swords and said to themselves, "It's like a person's surname, first name, character, number." In fact, there are quite a lot of future sword cultivators who have come to this secret realm, but Jing Juzhong watched their raising the Fei Jian from the sidelines, and the harvest was still very small. After all, it is not a world where the avenues are completely circulated. As for Fu Su and Gu Qin among the disciples, it was only luck that Jing Juzhong did not erase their memories. Under the big screen next to the stone table. After Qin Qinglu lost one hand, he played the score by himself on the chessboard. Jing Juzhong appeared and said, "Master. Don't dare." Qin Qinglu didn't lift his head. "I'm afraid of losing my life." Han Xiaosa was used to this. In those days, the master and his brother were together less often, but as long as they met each other, it was always the same situation. After 3,000 years of separation, the master and apprentice finally reunited, but the result is still so unsurprising. Han Ko's didn't know the origin of the master and the blind Taoist priest in Beipingzu. As for what the driver of Beiju Luzhou was in vain, and the scholar Qin Zhuoliu he didn't even know. Master's roots are not in Haoran but from a blessed land in Luxiazu. Han Ko's first saw Master when she was a young girl. At that time, Master was accompanied by a maid with a short spear named Xianxia. Han Qiao's first impression when she saw the burly woman back then was that she was really tall and had a big physique. But for some reason Xianxia always considered herself a maid, but her master called her a senior sister. Later the master accepted Lu Daochun's troublemaker as a young disciple, and Xianxia took great care of Lu Daochun and gave him a pink Taoist robe and a glazed pavilion. Han Ko's couldn't understand this at the time. Why did that woman surnamed Xia add to Lu Daochun's blue eyes? Later I asked my senior brother Jing Juzhong to know the answer. It turned out to be, a fool looks at a fool and is extra kind. But Han Xiaosa had doubts again because she could feel that senior brother Jing was actually very close to Xianxia, even closer than Master Qin Qinglu. Jing Juzhong said that Lu Daochun is a half-smart person who likes to pretend to be stupid and belongs to a real fool. Xianxia is not stupid but willing to be stupid, so he is really smart. Qin Qinglu threw the chess piece in his palm on the chessboard, looked up and asked, "Do you know why I refuse to teach you swordsmanship?" Master is willing to say a few more words is the best. The implication of Jing Juzhong's words is naturally that he, a disciple, already knows the answer. But Master, you can find something if you don't have anything to say. As a disciple, just listen patiently. To say that this eldest disciple has done something wrong or not, there really isn't anything wrong. On the contrary, it is only said that on the side of Taishishan Guo Aoding, who was beating and trying to breach the contract, was Jing Juzhong to climb the mountain instead of his master. A city of white emperor standing in the divine continent of Middle-earth, the city owner Jing Juzhong, recognized as the #1 giant in the world of demons. In the past, except for the vast world, the Qingming world and the wild world may not recognize it, but now they have to pinch their noses to recognize this fact. Beta Shengzheng is in the middle, really. Unreasonably strong. Even the old scholar, when Gong Dalin was drinking with Qin Qinglu, had to say something about our brother's ability to accept apprentices. There is really nothing to say. But to say that Jing Juzhong, the first disciple of the mountain, is so good and he is liked by Master, I'm sorry, but Qin Qinglu really can't like it. Damn, this guy is so smart. I remember that when Jing Juzhong had just started practicing, he fell in love with chess. Qin Qinglu felt that this was a bit out of business. A chi practitioner in the lower 5 realms has such spare time? How can you reassure your master to teach you swordsmanship? He just played a game with this great disciple, guessing chess pieces black and white. As a result, 36 times in a row, they all correctly guessed the color of the pieces. The young man didn't even look at the hand where the master was hiding the chess piece. From beginning to end he just stared at Qin Qinglius' eyes. Qin Qinglu seemed calm at the time, looking at the pale and colorless disciple across the table, but his eyes were shining brightly. Qin Qinglu began to murmur in his heart that he, the master, was picking up treasures by taking shit. Or did you go out without looking through the almanac and encounter a monster? Among those savage old beasts who just woke up, Who do you think is the most likely to join the 14th realm? Well, Xiao Imo on Luopa Mountain except for Bai Jing who has turned into a little girl is pretty good. Although they are not human, they are human. Unlike some people in certain places, they are obviously human but they are too immortal. Even the dojos are not on the ground. Right in the middle. Qin Qinglu sat down on the stone bench, looked at the two direct disciples standing and said with a smile, "Pretty, don't be stunned, sit down and talk." In fact, there were only two stone benches beside the table. Han Qiao glanced at senior brother. Xing Juzhong smiled and nodded. She dared to take a seat. It's easy to say elsewhere. Han Qiao say is not so restrained. After all, when you sit here you usually have to play chess with your senior brother. But Xing Juzhong didn't care about the harsh words of his master and said, "The pseudonym is Wang Youwu and the Taoist name is Shanjun. Its real body is not the Shanjun we think the world thinks." While speaking between the master and the apprentice on the side of the chess table, there appeared an elderly Taoist priest wearing a bamboo crown, carrying a sword and riding a deer. Qin Qinglu frowned and said, "Isn't that Bai Jing?" Xing Juzhong said, "She ranks third. Pure swordsmanship, it's more difficult to get along even if the path under your feet is in the right direction. It seems that there is only a line of separation but it is still quite far." This ancient demon clan who stole the title of Shanjun, the opportunity to meet the road lies in the phrase tyranny is stronger than tiger in later generations. Therefore 10,000 years later in the wild world the more tyrannical the road is, the higher its Taoism will be. You can sit back and enjoy it. It was able to take the lead because of the arrangement of the ancestor of Tuyue Mountain and Zhou, who drove half of the world to the Great Wall of Sword Qi to pave the way for it to join the road. I believe that Wang Youwu had already woken up at that time. After that, it's just pretending to be asleep. I guess it's only half a step away. Wang Youwu, who has stepped in with one foot and stepped on the threshold with half of his foot, can enter the 14th realm but it is hidden deeper. So wait until the battle was tragic. And within a few years Wang Youwu will be able to become the 14th realm. Hearing that there will be an additional 14th realm cultivator in the world, Qin Qinglu was completely indifferent, but just glanced at the sky. Among the 14 realm cultivators, how could there be no distinction between superior and inferior? Maybe Xing Juzhong was the only cultivator who dared to call Zhou by his first name in the human world. As for the remaining small group of great cultivators, it doesn't mean that they are not as strong as Xing Juzhong, but they are not suitable because of their status. In short, they each have their own concerns. Qin Qinglu asked. The second one is that anonymous person who deliberately avoided Bai Zai? Xing Juzhong shook his head and said, "It's the one with the pseudonym Li Go. The appearance of a boy with heavy pupils has been shown in the sky before." Qin Qinglu frowned and said, "Isn't the road to the joint path of refining things already taken first by others? There is a Wuzhou called Taiyin in the Qingming world and it is one step ahead. It stands to reason that every road of the great cultivator that joins the 14 realms is a single plank bridge. Just like Jianxia Xiaomo's success has fallen short, it is because Xuanduguan Sun Daoist is already on the road." Xing Juzhong explained, "Li Go once chose two paths at the same time. One is to refine things, the other is to eat books. The Tao manifested as a silverfish and created a book city trying to do the opposite." Wang. After Zhou ascended to the sky, it means that he deliberately gave up a single plank bridge that was almost ascending to the sky to Ligua. Therefore Ligua relied on this to join the road. It was not a big accident and it was almost a conclusion. Han Qiao's eyelids trembled. Qin Qinglu was still calm. "Do you think him against Li Jiao?" Xing Juzhong said, "He didn't dare to kill him at all, so when he met Master he would only avoid his edge." Qin Qinglu laughed. Han Qiao couldn't help laughing and she was no longer so nervous. Qin Qinglu smiled and said, "Then the Master can't thank you, this apprentice?" Xing Juzhong said, "I have to thank Master for not temporarily changing the color of the pieces in his hand." Qin Qinglu was silent for a moment then said, "I actually wanted to fool you when I was on the 18th pawn. It was that stupid big man who blocked it twice with his heart." Xing Juzhong said, "I recognize the process and I also recognize the result, so I have always been grateful to Master and her." If there is a 37th guess, Xing Juzhong can still guess correctly, but it is very likely that it will hurt the foundation of the Tao. That's why Qin Qinglu said today that Xie Shiji had blocked him twice. Xing Juzhong continued, "Wang Youwu, Li Jiao, and then there is a certain possibility of Bai Jing and that anonymous. But besides them, There is actually a concubine Fei who will walk before Bai Jing when the opportunity is right. On the surface, the concubine's ability to join the road is due to Bai Ze's guidance. But in fact, it can still be regarded as an old road that has been carefully laid out. Qin Qinglu said with a smile. If Zhou Mi is as powerful as you said, why would he go to the sky and run away in despair, and can only wait for the patriarch of the three sects to join the road, and then go and ask him a question? Xing Juzhong said, when Hai Zhou Mi was only one person after all. Qin Qinglu asked, what if Zhou Mi was with you and Xiuhu? Xing Juzhong smiled and said, it's best not to make assumptions about human affairs and don't talk about what if. Qin Qinglu clicked his tongue and said, Master is teaching the disciples. Xing Juzhong rested one hand on the stone table and said with a smile, Master. Qin Qinglu waited for the next sentence, but Xing Juzhong did not continue to speak. Qin Qinglu laughed and scolded, Stinky boy, are you kidding me? Xing Juzhong said with a smile on his face, Master taught the disciples a lot back then, and there is one sentence that the disciples will always keep in mind. Qin Qinglu said angrily, I'm getting old, my eyes are dim, my brain is not enough, don't let me guess, if you have a fart, let it go. Xing Juzhong said, Master once said to me, Juzhong, Master has only one disciple like you, and you can make more progress in the future to make Master happy. Qin Qinglu wondered, I actually said such serious words? Xing Juzhong said with a smile, it was because I was drinking too much. Master's drunken words are from the heart. Qin Qinglu rubbed his chin and muttered, damn it, there's an extra devil in the world, Xing Juzhong, so why do you have to blame me, Qin Qinglu? Xing Juzhong raised his hand, waved his sleeves and pointed to Tongyi's Hao, where the Confucian scholar Li Shixing was located. He smiled and said, all gentlemen, look at Duizi and kill Qingming for Haoren. Qin Qinglu was stunned for a moment and then suddenly yelled, Stinky boy, you tell me what to do with this, you can rest assured, what's the difference between you and bullying your teacher and destroying your ancestors? Really afraid of what to come? At this moment, a young Taoist boy appeared out of thin air and gently pressed Jing Zhezhong's arm. Scholar, don't be so angry. Beside the young Dao Tong, there was also a tall sword-carrying Daoist standing. Daozu's second disciple Yu Dou. Never thought that there would be another old master soon. He stretched out his hand to support Jing Zhezhong's arm. Lift it up, just lift it up, we scholars, why can't we say rhetoric? The most holy master also came, and there was the holy saint beside him. And a frowning old scholar. Qin Qinglu winked at the old scholar. The old scholar was silent. Old Shucai, it's up to you to smooth things out. Smee again. The donkeys also give some fodder to gnaw on the mill. What's more, in such a big scene with my thin arms and thin legs, can I blend in? Brother, don't you feel bad for your brother? Anyway, if something goes wrong with my big apprentice, I will go to Luopa Mountain to find your little apprentice. Then I try it? Hurry up. The old scholar laughed, stretched out his hand early, then held Jing Zhezhong's hand, shaking it vigorously. Brother Jing, let's go, let's play a game of chess. I'm afraid to scare you, brother, my chess skills have skyrocketed over the years. Today is no different than before. If you don't hide your clumsiness, I will definitely win you. After being so troubled by the old scholar, the Taoist ancestor and the most holy teacher withdrew their hands almost at the same time. Li Xing smiled and said, there is no need to exchange money. Yu Dou asked, do you want to exchange money? You're not convinced? Xing Juzhong asked rhetorically, believe it or not, I'll exchange money with Lu Qin. The three of us, let's leave the 15 realms. The only one who was sitting, Han Xiaosa, sat there dumbfounded, shivering. Dao Exin. What about Dao Exin? What is a real fairy fight? This scene is what it is. This is not the kind of harsh words that market teenagers meet on narrow roads. The old Shucai sighed. Brother Jing, why are you arguing with someone again? A gentleman should not speak up. If you can, don't speak up. Of course, it's best not to quarrel and fight. After all, people are really invincible. They all say that the shadow of a person's famous tree, only the wrong name is not given the wrong nickname. Is it a waste of fame? Besides, the realm of Lu Zhangjiao is very high. As for Li Shixing, forget it, after all, now it's my family. The most holy teacher probably couldn't listen anymore, so he coughed as a reminder to the old Shucai not to fight over here. The old Shucai is bitter, I call it the opposite. If not, can Jing Juzhong listen? In fact, Li Shixing had already noticed the situation here, so he wanted to come to Baidi City. The big deal was to play a game with Xing Juzhong in advance. If you weren't thinking about defending the road for the little bottle, it wouldn't make much difference whether the game was played early or late. It's just that Li Shixing was blocked by Li Xing. Li Xing just asked him to prepare for the debate of the three religions and he didn't care about the rest. Daozu looked up at the words. Jing Juzhong is indeed a rare talent in 10,000 years, and there is no need to compete for the first place. Daozu said, the 3 games of chess, you can play how you want to play. The Holy Master nodded and said yes. The old Xuecai nodded and said, 3 games are good, 2 wins and 1 loss. It's more fair, such as playing chess, whether you are in a good mood that day, whether you have enough to eat, whether you drink good wine or bad wine, your chess strength fluctuates. If you can't do it right, 3 games are good. After 1 game, you won't be arrogant or discouraged and prepare well for the next game. Qin Qinglu said with a smile. Old Xuecai has a lot of insight into playing chess. The old Xuecai still nodded. The insight is quite unique. The second sect, who came with the sword on his back to teach you Do, just looked in the direction of the overturned mountain in the past. Daozu laughed heartily. Sheng is in the middle, as you can see. Now that we finally meet, it's getting what you want. In the secret realm of Baidi City, a third Jing Juzhong appeared, wearing a Taoist robe, wearing a Taoist crown and full of Taoism. Daozu stepped out and came to this secret realm. He smiled and said, none of them are swordsmen, but the onlookers are clear. So let's follow the vines with fellow Daoists and talk about Kendo and One. I never thought about Jing Juzhong but smiled and said, I would rather know what the first underworld is about being lost. Daozu said, the name can be strong but the Tao can't be.